Hello everybody, welcome to our bonus podcast for this week. We are going to do it, this is going to be a big one, I can feel it in my bones. This is going to be long and controversial.
Is it?
Yeah, absolutely. It'll be controversial if we're really, really positive during that, I don't know. This is an Iain MacLeod retrospective, because finally his icy grip over Coronation Street has been relinquished, and now there's a new producer in charge.
Say icy grip.
Well, how can I say it? His loving embrace of Coronation Street had to be let go. He's not producer anymore.
He's the executive producer.
He's the executive producer, which means obviously he is going to have a lot to say about Coronation Street. But it's going to be Kate Brooks for the moment now who's going to be pulling the reins. We've been waiting to see
how many metaphors can you get?
I'm done. We've been waiting to see how long he would be credited on Coronation Street, and I think it was our listener Rebecca that pointed out to us that last Wednesday's episode was the first where he wasn't listed as producer.
Yes.
His wife Verity who's been acting as, is it deputy producer or assistant producer? I can't remember
the terminology.
For a while, but now she kind of stepped up as interim, so that in a month, 2 months, however long time, Kate Brooks is going to be taking over for good. But the bottom line is, Iain MacLeod, his work as producer as Coronation Street is no longer going to be on screen. It's over, so now it's time to look back over this past 5.5 years and give him a bit of a performance review. Oh, no. How did he do? How did he get on? Well, he's got one of them. He's got a massive promotion already without us. So I wanted to start off by scrolling back a little bit and thinking, well, what do we know about Iain when he first started as producer on Coronation Street, and what did we and other fans think about the news? So his hiring was announced in 2018 in June. The stories at the time were that Kate Oates, the previous producer, had quit, but there were, and I don't think they ever really went away, rumours that she was kind of pushed out by ITV, weren't there?
Yeah, I don't get it.
I think even in a few months before her exit from Coronation Street, she'd said, I'm going to be here for another year or so at least.
Yeah, she did seem to leave suddenly, and I don't really know why, but she moved on to work over at BBC.
She's done some great stuff there.
People were saying that maybe it was because she had dark stories.
That was the thing. Kate Oates, too dark.
Very controversial and very, gritty, crimey.
Well, the fact that Pat Phelan was the poster child in a way for Kate Oates' time at Coronation Street, yeah.
But the ratings had gone up under her. They'd got awards. There was good stuff to say about Kate Oates.
And to be honest, that was one of our favourite times doing the podcast. So we're massive Kate Oates trumpeters and supporters, but this was kind of the lay of the land when MacLeod went into the job. What he said, his thank you speech, whatever you call it, was only Corrie could have tempted me away, because he was working at Emmerdale at the time as producer. It gave me my first job in TV as an assistant researcher many years ago, and to be returning as producer is the fulfilment of a long-standing dream. It'll be like a reunion with an old friend, and I look forward to continuing the amazing work already being done by everyone connected with this show. And I think that's something that lots of people don't realise, is that when Iain became producer of Coronation Street, that wasn't his first time working on the show, not by a long chalk, was it?
No, he'd worked as a researcher. He's joined in 2006 as a researcher. Then he became a storyliner in 2007, and he storylined 514 episodes from June of that year to July 2009. Then he became a story editor between 2009 all the way through to September 2013 on over 1,000 episodes, and he left to be series editor and then producer at Hollyoaks, and then from there went on to be producer of Emmerdale in 2015, and then he went, like we said, to Corrie in 2018.
So he'd done lots of soap stuff. He had quite a rich pedigree here, didn't he?
Yeah.
But it wasn't just Emmerdale, wasn't just Hollyoaks, but he'd done an awful lot in Coronation Street as well. So he knew what Weatherfield was about. And if you look at the time he was in it, 2007 through to including the 50th anniversary with the tram crash. So yeah, he knew what made the folks of Weatherfield tick.
So because we didn't know anything about Emmerdale, we had to go by what the fans were saying about what is Iain MacLeod like as a producer. And I think the biggest things that I took away from what was being said was that he's a bit of an experimenter, because there was a dementia episode from a character called Ashley, and characters would the actors playing characters would change.
Yeah, it was from his point of view, and,
so
when he would look
changing.
at characters, it would be a different actor playing them.
Yeah.
I think they did more in the way of like flashbacks. There was obviously the hot and bypass stunt, which is
Big
another thing that
car
I
crash
think
stunt.
of when I think of what I was expecting of Iain MacLeod when he came into it, these massive expensive stunts. But even that week, I think leading up to it was different characters' stories and how they all merged together to end in this car crash towards the end of the week. We'd heard that he was not an axeman on Emmerdale, so it seemed like maybe as long as he carried that on in Coronation Street, people's jobs would be safe. But there was, despite the fact, I don't know, some people love a good stunt on a soap, some people hate it, some people love experimentation in editing, some hate it. We're certainly seeing that with some comments that Corrie's been getting recently. But generally, at least, looking on the Digital Spy forums, which I found was the best place to get, I'm not going to say unbiased views because they do skew towards the negative there, but it didn't look like people were massively excited about him coming into Coronation Street, were they? There was an awful lot of kind of God help Coronation Street if he's going to be at the helm. They said, that he was known for nonsensical stories, characters changing motivations at a hat, characters doing things to suit the storyline rather than what their personality would usually dictate. There was a bit of a focus on boring characters, apparently. Lots of affairs, lots of dressing up, apparently, as in, people wearing fancy dress, which Coronation Street has been through a phase of, but I don't know whether that was under McLeod or not. Not so much recently. Plot holes, and also prioritising shipping material. There was the whole Rob Ron story in Emmerdale.
Yeah, so fan bait relationships.
Yeah, a bit like we'd had with Kate and Rana, previously to, that was during Kate Oates' tenure, wasn't it? So I was a little bit...
And also characters changing personalities, you kind of touched on that.
Yeah.
Now, that's a really interesting summary, because I would say that he has pretty much been accused of doing the same thing by people
that's
don't
why I
like
wanted to mention it, to say, well, how much did this also fit
tenure
with
on
Corrie?
Coronation Street.
Yeah, and I think as we go through looking at some of the characters, some of the stories, some of the production techniques that have been used over the past 5.5 years, we'll certainly touch on, this is what he was being accused of at Emmerdale as well.
I mean, I use the phrase accused of.
Well, we know what we mean. But people didn't seem generally to be happy that he was coming into Coronation Street. And as much as I don't want this to be completely a negative podcast, I don't want it to be completely positive and ignoring the things that people haven't been happy. I want to try and get a bit of balance to this here. But I would say, looking at general fan reactions to Coronation Street at the moment and how it's sitting with people, I think lots of people seem to be glad that he's going, even though he is getting this promotion to executive producer, which means he's certainly going to be having his finger in Coronation Street's pie for quite a bit longer.
Well, I just want to say one thing here, and that is that it's like we try to be as fair as we can. We have our own biases, and I think that we discuss them frankly, and we make it. I think we make it obvious it's our opinion. It's not facts.
Yeah.
But I also want to just add in that there's a lot more to the job of producer than we're probably aware of, and I am sure that there are many things that Iain MacLeod does did as producer that are completely unknown to us, that have meant...
And with things ticking along nicely, you don't notice.
Well, that have, the stuff that he does, he's been promoted for a reason, and that reason is probably some behind the scenes things that he's done.
It's also
very complicated. It's a very complicated job. It's not just... I think a lot of people just think it's being in charge of what the story is of Coronation Street. There's certainly a really big element of that, but there's a lot more to it than that. And, the responsibility for what the stories are like is a kind of shared responsibility amongst the producer, the storyliners, and the writers. So
he's spoken about the fact that because he was a story editor, a storyliner in the past, stories for him are his bread and butter. That's what gets him excited about working at Coronation Street. But managing the brand, advertising, checking the episodes once they've been finished with. There's an awful lot that the producer does.
Yeah, and the logistics and the budgets and things. It's not just It's not just sitting around going, I know what I'd really like to ruin Coronation Street for 5.5 years, which is what I think some people think that his modus operandi was.
But also, I think it's important to point out that some of the things that we do attribute to, or so some people do attribute to Iain MacLeod and any producer, aren't actually, within
down to him. Yeah.
No,
like he didn't go, I know what, let's not have Coronation Street on when there's a match on ITV.
Yeah, or if there's budgetary.
Let's not pay everybody.
Yeah.
Let's not have location shoots. Let's have an extra episode every week.
Yeah, exactly. He can't say, you know what, let's just go down to 3 episodes a week. That's going to be an awful lot to do with ITV and the advertisers and how much revenue they're getting in. But I think I don't want to make excuses for him. Some of the things that I'm pretty sure he has had a hand in. Yeah, I've not been happy with, but equally there have been bits I've really enjoyed during his time as well.
But also, flip-flop it again, some of the things that we don't like are some people's favourite things. So
yeah, and vice versa. Yeah.
Right, so the first thing that Iain MacLeod did when he came in was to say that he was going to try and find a bit more of a balance between darkness and humour. He didn't criticise what was going on under Kate Oates, because there was a lot of dark stories, but he even said there's a heritage of this kind of stuff on Coronation Street going all the way back. The train crash in 1967, there was a suicide attempt, Sheila Birtles, we had Val Barlow being kidnapped, electrocuting herself. There's loads of really bad things that have happened in Coronation Street.
I think some people were hoping he'd be drawn into completely slagging off what Kate Oates made of Coronation Street, and he was like, no, Coronation Street does need to be dark as well, but that it does need to have the lighter side and the humour. And you're right, he wanted, one of his aims at being producer was to try and get a bit more of that balance. It had been gone a little bit too far one way in some people's view.
This was his first event as producer, wasn't it? That he was talking about, the issue storylines are great that Kate's done. I don't have a hit list of people I want to get rid of. I'm not going to be...
This quote kind of tickles me a little bit. He was asked about the unusual storytelling techniques that he'd employed sometime in Emmerdale, like this point of view episode for Ashley, for example. And he said, it's not about being conservative. I still think we can push boundaries and tell challenging stories, but I think in terms of the way we package our storytelling, this isn't the place for non-linear stuff or flashbacks or hallucinatory excursions into people's mental inner landscapes. Corrie's not about that for me. Corrie needs to keep one foot on the ground and remember the show that Tony Warren designed and not deviate from that too much. I mean, he's basically describing what Coronation Street is now, isn't it? Well, the opposite of it. So the flashbacks, the hallucinatory, or you say excursions into people's mental landscapes. There is an awful lot of this now, so I find it quite amusing to look back. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. So, was this something that he'd wanted all along? Could he just not resist temptation? Was he persuaded by directors or his higher ups into doing more of that? And we'll talk about more of that as we go on. It's
also interesting to me that he's saying, the heritage of Coronation Street is not to do these things, when it really, really is.
Well, that's very true. They certainly did have more, some of that kind of stuff.
It's always been
even in the early days in the 60s.
I really genuinely think if you want to boil Coronation Street down into some distilled liquid, you're going to get the same thing now as you did then. Some of the same things that people complain about and say, oh, it's not Corrie, is what Corrie was like when it first started. It wasn't afraid to do the odd hallucinatory excursion into people's mental inner landscapes.
Well, if you look at May Hardman's death in the first few episodes,
that was dark enough as it was. A character dies and collapses on the floor, and a knocking sound is heard in another house, and that's how they know she's died.
Yeah, that
was one of the very first storylines in the first 10 episodes of Coronation Street. It's always been dark. It's always been a bit weird. It's always had a bit of a experimental feel, because it also has its heritage and background in theatre and musicals and that kind of way of storytelling.
I think it's fair to say that there is more of it now than there was. But you're right.
I don't think that Tony Warren wouldn't have been up for some of the stuff that gets done now. Mm-hmm. I can't think you can't evoke the ghost of Tony Warren to turn up and waggle his finger at people for being a bit experimental with things. No, the whole thing was an experiment.
That's very true. So Iain MacLeod's reign, he kind of came in, I think it was December 2019 2018 when his first credited episodes appeared on screen. which was, I think that was the Christmas that they had the Black Bull Butcher in the snooker hall, talking about weird decisions.
No, yes, just to be clear, I don't always like it.
No, gosh, no, absolutely not.
You can't knock him for trying.
You kind of can't. I'm not going to say that I haven't. To begin with, it seemed like things were going well. There was an article in the Manchester Evening News that I found from February 2019 that said, how Coronation Street brought good old Northern humour back to the soap and fans are loving it. So this was an article really praising Iain MacLeod's output, particularly mentioning Gemma, and by gum, there was an awful lot of Gemma in that first year, wasn't there, in 2019? Her and Chesney getting together, getting pregnant. It was wall-to-wall Gemma there. And in a way, I don't blame him, because up until that point, she had been a relatively popular character, but I think that there was certainly an element of overuse to the extreme, and she went off the boil for lots of viewers. Mary was mentioned in this article, Evelyn even. Now, Evelyn had come into the show, I'm going to say September 2018, so just a few months before Iain started. So it wasn't, she's not his creation, but I think that if we're talking about the developing humour of Coronation Street over the past half a decade, Evelyn has certainly had an awful lot. Corrie has got Evelyn to thank for an awful lot of its humour.
I'll choose a linchpin of if you're going to say, if you're going to stake your claim, put a flag in, I'm going to bring back classic Corrie humour, then what he's done with Evelyn has been the poster child for that. And also, when Evelyn was first brought in, they did not really know what to do with her, and I'm not sure whether that was Kate Oates or just a normal teething problems, but if she had carried on as she had been in those first few months, she would not have been a popular character. It was a really rough start.
Yeah, she was too harsh, wasn't she? And I think
wasn't funny.
More of the humour and the heart has come in.
Yes.
Under Iain MacLeod.
Yes.
So anyway, seemed to be starting off quite positively, at least in the press. I think that from what I remember watching at the time, there was a little bit of wariness about overuse of overt humour and like. Gemma was like, let's see how many cakes we can get her to stuff into her mouth, and isn't that funny? Mary, personally, I don't find her anywhere near as funny as I once did, with her little flights of fancy and her talking about her stories about her mum and, this happened to me once. But people were generally enjoying it, I think. But as the year went on, more and more criticism arose. If you look at forum posts and social media, late 2019, that feeling that people had being worried about Iain MacLeod had certainly taken root, and people weren't sure that he was the best fit for Coronation Street, and even for that, people have been demanding for years that he gets axed. You only have to search for Iain MacLeod Coronation Street opinions online, and you will find years on years on people saying he's had enough.
But I also just want to point out too, with respect, that online fandoms have their own discourse, and sometimes that can be out of step with general viewers, and that's true of any television show. I think the worst thing that anyone can do is to pander to an online audience, because they don't represent necessarily your core audience.
No,
and I'm not criticising anybody, but because we're part of that. We're part of that kind of group of people where we have our own very deep conversations about a show that a lot of people forget happened the second they switch to another, TV show. I don't think many people think as deeply about it as we do, and sometimes you generate conversations amongst yourselves that are kind of detached from what is actually happening in the show. And I think it's fair enough to say that. I think almost everybody would say that. There's lots of online kind of cliques and stuff that rise up.
Lots of the people who speak most passionately about it online as well will certainly have a slight case of the rose-tinted spectacles about the past. Yeah. Not that that's to say that your opinion is invalid. I will, clearly Coronation Street now isn't in as strong a space as it was, before he started, I would say. We loved 2017, 2018 kind of time. If I watch back at the ITV3 episodes now from when they've just entered 2005, I can tell that I'm enjoying that more.
It's a rough time to be a Coronation Street producer. There's declining viewerships of television, terrestrial television in general. There's a lot more competition from high budgets, American television. Like since the era of Lost and Desperate Housewives, more money has been ploughed into television than I think ever has been before. TV is king. Movies have become on the back foot. You're getting Hollywood actors now turning to television, which they wouldn't have touched with a barge pole before that. And so you've got Coronation Street, which is a soap that was created in the 1960s north of England, that's now competing with like A+ $1 million budgets from America. It's not really a fair fight. So the fact that viewing figures have dropped is symptomatic, I think, of just either general viewing habits, but also competition from other things.
Yeah, I mean, in 2018, viewing figures were around the average for 2018 was 7.6 million, and now most episodes of Coronation Street get in the 4 millions, sometimes dipping just under into the 3. So viewership has roughly halved under him.
Yeah.
And although I think
it's not under him, it's while he was producer.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that some of it can be attributed to decisions that he has made, or or even the things that he has been forced to work with. You can't put it all down to him. It's just that's just the way it is. I think there's a
general decline, and I think that the thing about it is that ITV really needs to understand that soaps, sports, and reality television, like live stuff like Big Brother or I'm a Celebrity or whatever, those are appointment television. Those are things you have to watch when they're on. And Coronation Street and ITV, that's their strength. And it's still, Coronation Street is still one of the best performing television shows for ITV. So you can say the viewerships have halved, but that's just terrestrial television in a nutshell.
I wanted to talk a little bit about what he'd said earlier about this balancing of the darkness and the humour.
Those shagging pigeons are back.
I know. I'm watching. There were some very amorous pigeons.
Episode.
No, I know it was our Friday episode. We were talking about snogging and other things. Pigeons on the roof next door. Shall
I tell them to go away?
No, they're fine. They can put on a show for
down.
us.
Right, go on.
So what you were saying about balancing the darkness and the humour. How successful would you?
Are you not going to talk about the soap awards?
He's won some awards. There's been a few
best
BAFTA
in 2022.
Yeah.
Right. So how well did he balance the humour? I don't think I think the humour's I don't ever think I've had a problem under Kate Oates. I don't remember thinking, it's not funny enough. I think there's always been a bit of humour in Coronation Street, but I'm not going to say that Iain MacLeod brought it back. I think that there are.
If you look back, it's hard, isn't it? Because different people find different things funny.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not finding myself laughing more now than I was under Kate Oates or Stuart Blackburn, for sure. But maybe what I am doing a little bit more of is kind of groaning when jokes haven't hit.
Yeah. I'm going to say, there's different types of humour you can generate in Corrie, yeah? You can have like witty banter between characters, which Coronation Street used to be the best at. That was why people watched it in the 60s, because of people's sharp tongues and the kind of like scrapes they got into and the witty things they'd say to each other. They didn't really talk like normal people. It was very exaggerated, but it was funny and interesting to listen to. And then you've got comedy that's based on laughing at a character. So you have people like Kirk or Mary.
Gail.
And back in the old days, it would have been Minnie. Or Mavis, people like that. And then you've got situations that are funny, like, the hot tub's fallen through the floor, or think of anything funny that's happened in the last 5 years. I don't know, Gemma eats a donut or something, And I think that...
Hilarious.
Well, I think that on all fronts, Coronation Street has kind of faltered in the last decade.
I think that to me, when
I
Coronation,
don't find it fun. It's not. I don't watch it to laugh. I don't think I've ever watched Coronation Street because I think it's funny.
They'll sometimes have on rare occasions they'll have scenes that have got a comedy bent to them. I'm just thinking recently of Sally at the dinner party at Number One.
That was brilliant.
When she was kind of talking to Demi and trying to show off and
there should be more of that.
Rub elbows with her. But generally, I've found that under McLeod, when it's felt like, not serious scene or set up, and like, right, in comes Mary to say some silly story about her mum and when she was younger. Anyway, back to the conversation. It almost feels like a token, let's throw a joke in there because, hey, isn't Corrie funny?
Sarah and Carla will be having an intense conversation about the fact the factory is about to go bankrupt, and then Kirk will come in and say some idiot comment about him misunderstanding the meaning of a word.
There was one episode back early on in his tenure, I think, where he was talking about having an itchy bum, and then it just turned out that it was his underpants label, and they managed to string that out over the course of a few scenes.
Was that funny?
No. But although, speaking of Kirk, the my soul, your souls, our souls was also
hilarious.
under Iain MacLeod. So it's not like we're saying Kirk can never be funny.
But
it feels like that's all he's there for, to try to, and more often than not, it doesn't hit, because for me, when he says something stupid, it's like, surely nobody would be that dumb. And I think before he and some of the other sillier characters, you could think, oh yeah, they probably would say that, or they probably wouldn't know that.
I think what the problem is that Iain MacLeod... Well, I'm going to say Iain MacLeod because I don't know, but whose fault this is. Iain MacLeod said, I want it to be funny, but I want you to also fit in 5 storylines, 3 of which are issues about things that are incredibly tragic and important. You can't do it. You watch an old episode of Corrie where they're being witty and fun and clever. It's because the only thing that happened in that episode was that, I don't know, Albert Tatlock lost his pocket watch or something.
Yeah,
the whole
that
episode.
was the high stakes drama.
There will be a whole episode where nothing really happens except for one thing, and the drama is how the characters interact with each other, and a lot of the humour is based on that. You just can't have it. There's no time for it. You've got 6 episodes. You've got 3 hours a week. Well, it's not really. It's like 2 hours. But there's no time for anything else. You can't, as a producer, really expect there to be comedic moments in amongst so much really heavy drama. I mean,
but it will often just feel forced.
It doesn't. There's no time for it. Like in the last, if you think about one of the major storylines at the moment is Leanne in a cult, and the 2 big driving factors for the 2 main characters in this story are Toya and Leanne, and both of them have got dead children, and that's what's motivating them to do everything they're doing. Where's the funny bit in that? You can't seriously demand writers or storyliners to create a humour or audience even to find it in really heavy stories. In the same week, you've got Paul who's dying of MND. Well, cue the laugh track. I don't think so.
You say that, but to be fair, they have actually, compared to some of the other tragic illness stories, done a better job with Paul at being able to keep it somewhat light-hearted.
Yeah, it's light-hearted. It's not the same as being funny. You can understand the difference.
And I think maybe that's what
I'll feel like my heart feels full because I feel happy or contented, or I've been emotionally fed in some way. But that's not the same as humour.
Yeah, I think that just trying to force the jokes in is often where Corrie doesn't quite get it.
I just really wish that Corrie would spend a bit more time on dialogue and characters being funny, but they don't have time because almost every line is plot driven.
Darkness, though, on the other hand, when we wanted to talk about have they balanced it out, there's certainly darkness in Coronation Street now, isn't there?
More dark now than it was under Kate Oates. But Kate Oates' darkness was a bit more sensational.
I am the darkness and the light. Was that Iain MacLeod's quote coming into it, or was that Pat Phelan at the Lighthouse? I always get those 2 mixed up. Although Iain MacLeod, like we said, not an Axeman. It feels fairly bleak in Weatherfield at the moment, and even when you got your characters like Glenda, who's supposed to be the comedy relief, is currently embroiled in a storyline where she's taken her brother to court and everyone's just kind of peed off with each other
about their dead dad's will.
Yeah,
and it's a funeral business. Like, no.
But I don't generally have a problem with the darkness.
No,
if
I
I
don't
did,
at all.
I wouldn't have liked Kate Oates' era so much. But it doesn't particularly bother me.
I don't either. But I'm judging it based on his stated. If his mission statement wasn't, I want to make this funny as it is compelling, then I wouldn't have had a problem with it. If he'd come out and said, I want this to be really dark and issues driven, and I don't want any character stuff, I just want plot, I would have said 10 out of 10, you completely did what you set out to do. But it doesn't feel like that's what he wanted to do.
But he did come out and saying, I am a story man. Like I said earlier, he said that I've got a quote somewhere later on in the notes.
That's one of the biggest failures, I think.
Saying stories are what's important to me, and almost he said, like, I don't care if a storyline or a writer or whatever has got an idea for a story, I don't really often mind which character gets it. I'm paraphrasing him here, as long as the story's good. And I think that's been a bit of his downfall.
That's the weakest thing to do in a soap. In my opinion, I think that's taking one of the biggest strengths that you can have in a soap and just turning it into a weakness, and that's not what you should be doing.
Let's get to stories and characters and things later. I wanted to think a little bit about, again, what we were expecting from him and what are some maybe Iain MacLeod hallmarks. And certainly when he came into it, I was very excited about the stunts that he'd be able to put out there, because I would readily admit that I watched the Hot and Bypass on Emmerdale, and I was insanely
I thought it was
jealous
amazing. Yeah,
that was
jealous.
Not a Coronation Street scene. That's like the most spectacular stunt I have ever seen on a British soap by quite a margin, and I think I'm probably counting the tram crash in here. It's been a while since I've seen that, but that was a bloody brilliant stunt. So I was really excited to see what he would do in terms of Corrie stunts. What would you say were some of your favourite stunty moments under MacLeod, and would you say he's lived up to our hopes for that?
Well, I'd rather go through this. You've written a chronological list. I'd rather talk about that than try to pick out my favourites. So, like, one of the biggest stories of his beginning was the factory collapse.
Yes, and that's probably, I would say, one of the biggest stunts that, still that he has done on Coronation Street. Not the biggest.
I don't think there's been...
I think the sinkhole probably tops it, just because of the sheer scale of the practical effects and everything that was involved in that. But the factory collapse, for me, a lot of people hated it. I've just kind of been doing a little bit of reading back from posts and whatever from 2019, and a lot of people didn't really enjoy it. And you can go and listen to whatever we said live at the time, but looking back on it, I've got fairly positive memories of the factory story. And seeing Sally falling in, Gina there at the top watching her, Rana's final moments, heartbreaking.
I mean, in a sense, that was him planting a flag, wasn't it? It was him saying, here I am, this is what I want, this is what I'm going to do. And the factory, I'm going to bring down the symbol of modern Corrie, which is the factory. The factory's not been there since the beginning of the show. It's probably the newest landmark.
Yeah, one of them for sure.
All right.
I mean, it's that side of the road has been fairly stable
newer than the
since
factory?
the 90s. Well, I mean, I'm thinking of like Victoria Street.
Well, that's always been there according to the show.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
The factory, we know. Yeah, that's my point. I'm going to bring down the modern symbol of Corrie and, kill a character off at the same time.
Yes, but I think that one of the criticisms that was levied at him after the factory crash was that things went back to normal fairly quickly, and you've spoken a lot about the lack of consequences for big climaxes under Iain MacLeod.
It should fundamentally change something.
I mean, yes, it did lead into Carla's mental health collapse, and there were some great scenes there. That Britain's Got Talent week, of course, Rana died, so that was pretty sad for Imran and Kate, but a couple of years on and things are pretty much back to how they were. Well,
I mean, it did affect Gary probably the most, but now, like you say, he's back to what? I don't know, just pretending he's a good guy.
Yeah, well, Gary, you're right, actually. That kind of spiralled him off into his big villain stage, didn't it? Iain MacLeod came in and said that I've got an idea for a villain. I want there to be not just somebody who comes in, murders a few people and then gets killed off, but somebody who's always there, kind of niggling and riling people up in the background, and he was kind of hinting that this would be Gary, and it wasn't until the Britain's Got Talent week that year that we discovered it was Gary that was the one responsible for the roof on the head. But you're right, that was a storyline for him for a year or two, and now he's pretty much being back to Mr. Nice Guy, and he's still not really paid for those crimes, has he?
I don't think so, but I know that people don't agree with me. The same year we also had the prison riot with David. That was kind of chaotic and fun.
That was good. I enjoyed that. Maybe it was over a little bit quickly, but I don't know how long a prison. I know that in Orange Is the New Black they managed to make the prison riot last for a whole season, but I think it was fun enough in Coronation Street. Good to get on location.
Yeah, yeah.
There was also the stuff that Christmas. I mean, 2019 was relatively stunty, I suppose, because that was when they had the Winter Wonderland at Christmas, and Derek falling off the Helter Skelter and after each shot was shooting Shona in a box, and then he goes and shoots Robert in the Rovers. That was, again, if you don't like the darkness in Corrie, you probably hated that. But I think we quite enjoyed it.
I did as well. Yeah, I think I did. I mean, Christmas in Corrie is normally not dark, and they went a different direction with it. And
Robert was the first major character to ever die in a Christmas Day episode of Coronation Street.
And
it was a twist and a shock, which Kate Oates was well known for putting a few more what's it called? Unspoiled twists in episodes. And as the years have gone on, it seemed like that's not really been Iain MacLeod's MO.
No. Then disaster strikes in real life. And I think that this is one of the biggest issues with Iain MacLeod's time as producer, is that he has had unprecedented challenges working on the show.
You said unprecedented. Are we talking about COVID here?
And unfortunately, I think the effects are still with us, and some of the ways of the strategies that have been used to try to cope with the pandemic, which is what I'm talking about, are still with us now. And they make life easier behind the scenes, but to the detriment, I think, of the show. Which, one of the biggest things is block filming. But because of the pandemic, 2020 only really had one stunt, and that was, I feel, very dialed back, and they had to put a lot of things on the back burner.
Well, it was the 60th anniversary of Coronation Street.
It was Jeff on the roof, and then he gets pecked to death by chickens.
They did. I mean,
and it was good. It was good, but I don't think it was the vision.
No, they rebuilt the number 6 roof, didn't they? Just to one side. I think it was built up where the precinct is now. We were told once.
But I do think it looked like it didn't look like it was real.
Well, they did have Ian Bartholomew and Shelley and Sarah bubble up, didn't they? So that they could film those scenes in close proximity together. Was that also? It must have been. That must have been the year where they had the stunt of the mannequin Sarah being pushed out of the way by Gary and getting hit by a car.
And I think that Coronation Street deserves, and Iain MacLeod deserves, a lot of praise for the work that they did during that time. And I don't think that many other people were in the same situation as they were. And I like how resilient they were, and I like that they still put the show out, because we take it for granted. But there was a point where it was in question as to whether any television could be made. We didn't know what was going to happen.
Well, Coronation Street was the only soap that managed to keep going completely during the pandemic, because the output is so high, so they had so many in the can.
Well, yeah, but also they're the most. I mean, I think this is right, but are they not the most output?
Corrie.
Yeah, they've got the most number of episodes and minutes in a week.
Yeah.
So how on earth they managed to keep that going? I mean, we all know because we talked about it, but
I
don't think that you can.
They cut down the hour episodes into half hours.
I know.
That's
what I just meant.
Yeah. So
I'm just saying. I think we look back perhaps and don't appreciate.
It's true.
In retrospect, how much of a mammoth task that was.
I was thinking about this the other day and wondering, would I have. Well done, they managed to keep it on the air. But equally, on the other hand, would it have been better if they'd have said, well, let's pause it, let's take a chance to reevaluate things, or even let's try and be a bit more experimental with it, like some of the other soaps were. EastEnders had a lot of kind of composite shots, didn't they, to make characters look like they were in the same room together.
Everybody had different strategies.
Yeah, Emmerdale had their two-handers about how, Paddy and whoever was, I can't name
because they actually addressed it, whereas in Coronation Street, I think there was one line from Mary about singing out of a window, but in general, it's like they never really had a pandemic. I think at one point, Nick said, I was queuing at the supermarket for you.
Well, they had face masks for a while, didn't they? And there was the whole thing of you walk around with a face mask and then take it down to speak to somebody, which defeats the object. They also had, the one-way system in the Rovers. It was funny, and Iain MacLeod kind of said at the time, look, viewers, you're going to have to just go with us on this. But we saw the Weatherfield residents all the way up until whenever it was, July of 2020, when they was able to. I think they resumed filming beginning of June, and then it started appearing, July, August maybe, and up until then everything was completely normal. And then out of nowhere, suddenly, people are wearing face masks. So it was kind of jarring. And also, characters even now will say, "Oh, do you remember lockdown? Oh, do you remember when the schools were closed? Oh, do you remember this?" And they weren't in Weatherfield, were they? And so we should have talked about this really when we did our retcons and revisions episode a few weeks ago.
True.
They according to them now, Weatherfield High was closed, but not from what we saw.
And I genuinely think that they would have not even mentioned the pandemic or had anything if they didn't have to adhere to requirements by law to do with filming distances and wearing face masks and one-way systems, which I think they just incorporated into the plots.
Yeah.
So I think they would have preferred to have not ever had anything to do with the pandemic in the show, but they were forced to. And you can say what you like about it. It's good or bad, I don't know.
And I mean it was good management by Iain MacLeod, I would say, and the fact that he was able to keep people with their jobs. He made the wise decision. I know his hand was probably forced, but to say, right, sorry, if you're over 70 you can't be in the show. The young ones couldn't be in the show, not because children weren't allowed to, but because their chaperones would be coming on and potentially spreading the COVID a bit more.
It's mind-boggling. How much things changed from week to week when we were in the thick of it, and then to imagine the logistics of trying to organise and also making sure that there was still a show at the end of it, and not knowing how long anything was going to last. And I think if you're going to say anything about Iain MacLeod, good or bad, I think the only thing you should say is that he took the show through one of the most turbulent times in society in recent, since World War II, I can't think of anything that has been more disruptive of everyday life. And I think that's fair, or maybe I'm being stupid and missing something obvious. I don't think so. And this producer took Coronation Street through that. Since the show started, there's never been anything as disruptive as this. Even the strikes weren't as bad as what happened during the pandemic. And Iain MacLeod took Coronation Street, got it through, made a show, and I think it was important for Coronation Street. But more than that, and this is going to sound cheesy and stupid, I think it was really important for the psyche of the country to know that things were still carrying on. Things were, even though lots of things in your life didn't make sense or were scary or different, you still could watch something that was predictable and safe, and it was on TV and it never stopped.
Well, they also had the Corrie Good News, didn't they, with Coulson Smith?
That's true, yeah.
What was that, weekly? He'd do his online little, here's what the Corrie fans have been up to this week, and here's a Zoom interview with Shani King and how's she getting on, and all that kind of stuff. It was great.
They took the part of their job, which is entertainment, seriously. And that kind of does speak to the heritage of Coronation Street, because as I said before, lots of people that were in the show in the beginning of the 60s were music hall veterans and people that were performing during the war for troops around Europe and around the UK. And that kind of spirit of, in the face of adversity, making some art that helps people get through life, I don't think you can underestimate how powerful and important that is.
But like you said, and this is what kind of led us into this little side.
But the stunt was crap.
There was not so great stunts. It was such a shame that it coincided with the 60th anniversary, because although the 60th anniversary week was quite good, seeing Jeff getting taken down by Imran in court.
Oh yeah, that was good.
The other story was Ray Crosby. Remember, him and Debbie were buying up all the businesses, and they were going to put this big hotel up, and it was just a bit of a damn squib. Well, I think it was supposed to be
what the sinkhole.
The sinkhole was supposed to be in.
I know, but I would actually like to have known what the plans were. I know what we got, and I know what the rumours are.
I'd like to have known
And the
how they would
theories.
have merged.
Yeah.
The Ray, would Ray have fallen to his death in the sinkhole? Was his hotel have fallen into the sinkhole?
Well, we all quite like the idea of his hotel, didn't we? So
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, we didn't get that in 2020.
I reckon
but
Iain MacLeod's been angling all this time for, because we've got Sainsbury's, we've had the Co-op, we've had EE,
Hayes.
and we've got Hayes now. I reckon he's been angling for Premier Inn to build a hotel
Yeah.
over the factory.
Maybe.
And it hasn't just come to fruition.
I think that's one thing that you can say, and again, I don't know how much he's got to do with this, but Iain MacLeod, I'm kind of feeling, has been quite good in the advertising and promotion of the show, and trying to get the money in that way by the sponsorships. Exactly.
Because if you can't get money from viewership, which is eyes on ads, you've got to increase the amount of ads that you have room for. And the only way to do that in a show that is in an hour slot and already has advert breaks all the way through it, the only way to do it is product placements and sponsorships.
Yeah, and although I'd probably rather they didn't, and they're not exactly subtle, are they? Pint of zero, please, Jenny. We're here at least once a
I'm
week.
just going to use my
goes
contactless card.
there goes the Argos van round the corner again.
There's probably loads of stuff that we don't know, because I know that there was stuff that they put in
that's a bit more subtle,
that was very almost invisible to us, but got money for. They got money for it.
Go anyway. We keep being distracted.
I know, sorry.
Stunts. So 2021 was the sinkhole. So a year later than they originally intended, the sinkhole that had opened.
The Halloween horror.
Yeah, the sinkhole that had opened in the Platt's back garden in autumn of 2020 finally opened up a little bit more, and again, lots of people hate that. I loved it. I thought, and I think, although it doesn't live up to the Hotton bypass crash for me, it's easily one of my favourite stunts that the Coronation Street had ever done. Having all the underground sewers, the water, Jenny going down there, doing a little swim with Johnny as Shona rescuing her, Jenny and Johnny getting trapped under the drain, Abby and Corey down there with the gun. I absolutely adored that week, as ridiculous as it was, which it was. I'm not going to say it wasn't. That had me on the edge of my seat, and even though we lost Johnny, one of my favourites, I still look back on that week with an awful lot of affection. But as I totally get that other people didn't. You feel the same about that week, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken about it before. It was cheesy and camp, and yeah, I mean,
it had the scale of it. When you see the behind the scenes, and everything that they had to build.
I mean, I'm thinking of Abby and is it
Corey
in a it looked like part of a ghost train, because of the lighting was quite funny, wasn't it? It was like orange and stuff. The stuff with Jenny and Johnny was harrowing and amazing, and like you said, really intricately designed and filmed with the special set they went to. I forgot the name of the studios, but they had to. Yeah, amazing stuff. There was two elements to that week, and that was certainly the most impressive.
We're not going to get anything like that for a while now, it feels like. And Iain MacLeod came into it, I was hoping for stunts, and I think with that they certainly delivered for me. We had a couple of other stunts in the following years. Imran's death when they crashed into the building. That was quite well done. Having him pulling Toya out the car. Sad that he just kind of...
Whoops.
Now I'm dead. Now we're past that. That was quite good.
Then we had the volume wall.
Oh, the volume wall.
R. Kelly's exit. We had the rooftop scene and the bottle crash into the floor, and
that was just showing to me why practical effects on Coronation Street will always be king, because they must have spent an awful lot of money getting that volume wall to make it look like they were on top of a building, but I just couldn't stop thinking. It didn't look like Corrie. It didn't look real. I was completely taken out of the reality of the situation. Partly me, it was because of Corrie have been saying, hey, we've got a volume wall, we've got a volume. Maybe if they hadn't said it, I'd have gone, oh, look, they're filming on top of a building now. I don't think so necessarily, but I thought that was a bit of a dud. And since I think they used the volume wall again in Stevens last year, didn't they? When they had Tim driving around Weatherfield. Not just going out to into Manchester like they could have done, but with a horrible screen behind it. It looked
I'm going to say
fake.
this. I don't think there's a place for a volume wall on a soap.
No, I really don't think
There's
so.
nothing in it, and there's nothing in the life of a normal person that requires you to use a volume wall instead of
Going to the place.
driving down the road or standing on a building.
Yeah.
We're not filming this on Mars. This is Manchester. Don't need
when they had
a fake cityscape.
When they had old Christine Hardman
Yeah.
about to throw herself off Elliston Raincoat Factory roof in 1961, they didn't have a volume wall for that. They put her on a roof.
They shoved William Roach up a chimney.
Yeah, and I know that health and safety was a little bit different back then, but that was much better.
Yeah, I do.
We also,
if you want to hear some ideas for how they could have used a volume wall on Coronation Street, we do have a Patreon episode.
Oh yeah, we did.
Which I'm really proud is one of my favourite episodes we've ever recorded, and honestly,
Top 5.
I think it's worth joining Patreon just to listen to that.
Top 5 uses of a volume wall that we'd want to see.
It was really fun to record that, so check that out
creative.
if you have access.
The only other thing that's kind of come up recently that's been stuntish was the bomb explosion. You know, they blew up a van in the park, and then they had the episode where Alia, for some reason, took leave of her senses and drove around Weatherfield with a bomb strapped to her like Keanu Reeves. But that wasn't so great. But so really, it was, you know, the factory collapse and the sinkhole with the big stunts, and it didn't quite live up to, you know, it doesn't wow me as much as the Hotton bypass crash did. But I think that he pretty much delivered in terms of stunts for me.
Stunts are hard on a soap. I mean, personally, I think there should be one big one a year. That's how I feel about it. I think there should be one around. I hate the idea of super soap weeks and whatever they are twice a year. I think it's hopelessly ridiculous to base your entire show around bloody Britain's Got Talent or whatever it is. So from that perspective, it annoys me. You should be able to do it whenever you want. But one big stunt, maybe around Christmas.
But any time of year, I say, catch your viewers off guard.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Don't say that it's happening.
Don't go check out the volume wall next week.
Well, talking of volume walls, I wanted to kind of segue into the other effects that have been creeping their way into Coronation Street of late under McLeod's leadership. So
you keep saying McLeod, he sounds like a villain Is it because of Fox McLeod?
No.
From what's it called?
Star Fox.
I keep thinking that you're.
But he's not a villain. Like, he's the good
I know,
guy.
but the way you. What? I know, but it just sounds like McLeod.
There's been an awful lot of things that he said he wouldn't bring in. Dream sequences, hallucinations, ominous music in the background. And I think what started off as being like, oh, this is kind of a bit neat, soon turned into, oh no, they're not doing that again.
I don't mind this as much as you do.
It bugs me. I really enjoyed the dream sequence with Yasmin in prison when she gets up and then it turns out that Jeff's everybody, serving her food to the other prisoners.
And Jeff's made probably more post-death appearances than any character ever.
Well, I don't know whether Sinead would fight him on that one, but I suppose that's just a video.
Those were just what you...
That's
like saying Audrey Hepburn haunts us all.
It didn't bother me too much with that, but there was do you remember Daisy's wedding? I mean, we all remember it for the acid attack, but that episode started with her having a bit of a dream sequence outside, and then the taxi pulls up and it's Justin driving it. But they did do dream sequences during Phelan's era as well, didn't they? There was one that we loved with Andy where he was beating a load of Phelans around the head with the 2x4. There was a funny dream sequence towards the beginning of Iain MacLeod's tenure where Gemma dreamt about putting baby Aled in a washing machine. Do you remember that one? And then it turned out that it wasn't real. Maybe the dreams don't bother me too much. I think it's more the music bugs me. Well, the sound effects, you know, when a character's being told that they've got some hideous life-limiting disease, and then you got the kind of sound. I don't like that. And even recently, when they had Joel tapping away on his phone, deleting Ellie from his contacts, there was ominous music just to remind us that he's a villain. Corrie really, really doesn't need that. And I think the same with some of the flashbacks as well. Do the flashbacks bother you? Because we've been seeing a hell of a lot more of those in the last few years.
Flashbacks.
You know, like Tim after the Stephen stuff, he kept remembering back to it.
No, I don't like it when it's a shortcut for just a character looking sad. I mean, you know, I've said this a million times, but Coronation Street is hampered by the fact that there's no internal monologue. And so a character, you only know a character's emotions by the facial expressions of the actor, the music that they choose, if they're going to do some kind of
something in the jukebox in the Rovers, or
them saying something to another character. And a way that they hack around that is to have the flashbacks where we discover something or a dream. And so an example of like them trying to portray something they feel they couldn't have done any other way was like when Adam was having his panic attacks.
Oh yes, that I really that winds me up. The panic attacks, I don't like that.
Digby Chicken Caesar, like esque, like Mitchell and Webb look. Just
the camera is up in his face.
The fact that they've had to struggle to think of many different ways of portraying panic attacks makes me think they might have overused panic attacks in Coronation Street. Because although I think both of us have had panic attacks in real life, I don't have any problem with them showing them. I think it's important to talk about things like that, but I don't think we ever need as many as Coronation Street had. And this is the problem that they have also with the traumas and the issues that they pile onto these characters, is that the only realistic kind of result of those is trauma, depression, panic attacks,
when they had
mental health issues. And then how do you portray that without a character just going, I feel really sad today?
They had it with Gary during the tram crash, didn't they? Because he was getting his PTSD from Afghanistan, and the camera went a bit woozy and wonky there. So it's not like Corrie has never done it before. We've already said that they employed this technique even back as far as the 60s, but it's just feeling like it's happening a bit too much. And I'm kind of thinking, well, we've been able to get this far without seeing this many weird camera techniques. Why do they think that they need to crack them out now?
It's only powerful when it comes out of nowhere and it's not been done for a long time. And unfortunately, Coronation Street went through a series of everyone have a panic attack.
Everyone's having mental health breakdowns. Everybody's remembering something shocking that happened to them in the past. I mean, they even had flash forwards during Imran's last week, didn't they?
But I like that. The most recent thing that he's done that's experimental is the week that we just had leading up to
the Perspectives one for Britain's Got Talent week, leading
following
up to
a different person. They all start at the beginning of Monday with the coffee being spilled, and then it spins off from there. And I really like that, but I don't feel that they went as far as they should have done with it. I feel like they kind of gave up halfway through the week.
I think if I know it's going to be a special week, I'm more...
Yeah, that's true. Your expectations are different.
Yeah, it's going to be good. Oh, look what they're doing. That's fancy.
But
if it's a normal week and somebody's out having a woozy moment.
Yeah.
Although, one of the things that we absolutely loved, a favourite scene of both of ours last year, was Stephen's LSD trip. And I think that was made all the more effective by them going so far into those editing techniques.
But you see, imagine how weak that would be if we had another one this year. Someone else has got LSD or someone else is having, just, it worked because it took you by surprise and it was interesting and unusual, and there's room for that in Coronation Street, but we
spread it out a bit. If you're thinking about camera techniques, something that to me has still been the most effective one that I can think of under Iain MacLeod's time, I just can't forget the scene, Jeff's magic box scene. You remember in Speed Dial, and that was Matt Hilton directing it, and they had the tracking shot of Yasmin getting into the box, the camera's panning around it, Jeff's trying to get her out, that she's kind of struggling there, then she gets out in the end and he calls her a bitch. That was so well done.
And the whole thing felt really unreal and surreal and unsettling, and there's some really good stuff that's happened. Really good stuff.
Yeah,
and the thing is
CGI,
also,
I just don't think CGI needs to be in quite so much. Even I was joking before the new year that I bet the last shot of 2023 is going to be the CGI fireworks over the newly open Rovers. Yeah, it was. And it can be that predictable.
Yeah, and it wasn't even like good CGI. Like normally it kind of looks like, okay, I can tell you it's CGI, but it does look like it possibly
How much
could.
does it cost to stick a firework up.
It's
Maybe
like
maybe I'm just ignorant of it. But we've just seen New Year's Eve 2004 to 2005 on ITV3, and they had real fireworks. Everybody just standing on the street looking at the real fireworks. It was lovely.
If you're going to have fireworks, just have real fireworks, because this is Weatherfield. Nobody's paying for £100,000 worth of fireworks. You don't have to spend loads of money on fireworks. You just set off a bunch of poppers.
Speaking of fireworks...
Mind you, it's probably expensive for lots of other reasons that are fairly boring, like insurance.
Speaking of fireworks, something that Coronation Street really wanted to celebrate underneath Iain MacLeod was the 10,000th episode that took place in 2020, mere months before lockdown would have meant that this could never have happened. I think when we're reviewing his time as producer, that's worth mentioning, like, how did the 10,000th episode kind of come across, and did he do a good job with it? Now, we've not seen the episode since it was on.
No, that's true.
It's not one that we've revisited.
I think we probably should do. I think it would be fair to do a revisit, but I don't know when is the best time. Maybe...
Well, it's like the tram crash we've talked about. One day we'll go and rewatch that and talk about that for the podcast. When's a good time?
Maybe next year, maybe in February 2025, we should watch it again. Because unfortunately, my only enduring memory of that is what they did to Dennis's ashes.
Yeah,
which,
same.
Number one, they killed him off, which I hate. And number two, they ran him over like it was a joke. And I know I'm not supposed to be so mad and salty about it 4 years on, but I am, because Dennis Tanner was possibly the best character Coronation Street's ever seen, and I know that you wouldn't know that if you only knew him from when he came back. We'd
just been starting to watch the 60s episodes on the DVD when this was on, and so we were all full of love for Dennis Tanner, and this is just kind of sticking two fingers up at him, really, it felt like. And you're right, that's what really does linger for that episode for me. But I mean, it was about a load of ladies going off on a lovely coach trip, although they didn't get to Blackpool. I think I was just a little bit let down that they didn't reach their destination as well, and it was nice seeing them on the bus together, but it was more of just let's have a jolly time. But some people like that, didn't they? I mean, people say that's what Corrie should be about, just people having a lovely time together.
Okay, but it wasn't the concept I had a problem with. It was the way that it let me down a little bit, and I would love to see them do that again, try something like that again, because I think there was a really good idea, and it used a bunch of characters that I really like. You know, Jenny was there, Rita was there, Dennis's ashes were there,
Nina, and Yasmin, and they kind of tied it in with the Jeff story, didn't they, by having her come back after a lovely day and he was there waiting for her. I just can't help but shake. I just can't shake the whole making a mockery of Dennis Tanner thing. There was a lovely scene at the end, to be fair, with Rita in the pub and she's listening to all the voices. Now, that is a little bit old hat.
I know, but I just spent the whole time going, I can't believe it.
But then Jenny comes in and Rita's like, oh, you're the best daughter I could have ever asked for.
Yeah, that was lovely.
That was quite lovely. So I think he did a pretty good job. And from what I hear about Emmerdale's 10,000th episode that just happened recently, I think Corrie kind of did a much better job with that. I don't think that Emmerdale's one, tell me if I'm wrong, made as much of an impact as Coronation Street.
Well, they're just cheating because they do 5 episodes a week.
One of the things that they did in this 10,000th episode was try and shoehorn in, and it's fine when you do it for a special episode, but the references to the past, like even at the beginning of the episode, Rita was cleaning up in the Rovers and Jenny comes in and says, oh, put your mop down, Hilda, and obviously they had the Dennis bit in there, they had the voices at the end. How do you think that Iain MacLeod has done a decent enough job with referencing the past and remember, not losing track of the fact of where Corrie's come from?
It's, good and bad, because sometimes it feels like, oh gosh, they haven't mentioned that this has already happened to this person, or or they should really have said that. But there comes a point at which it's all been done before by everybody, and if you just threw in every reference to every time that this certain particular situation has happened before, you'd never have time for anything new. I
think a lot of the characters that people would like to have referenced, not many of the characters these days even know who they are.
Coronation Street has been going over longer, generations worth of people, and I mean, who really remembers your grandma's neighbour? No, you wouldn't have reason to even talk about it, let alone remember it.
Yeah. One thing that Iain MacLeod, speaking of old, being in touch with the past, one thing I think he has done relatively well is the comebacks. And unfortunately, there's an awful lot of characters that we'd like to bring back from the past that have either been killed off, or the actors have passed on, or your Saran Jones, your Sarah Lancashires are a little bit out of Coronation Street's pay grade now. But I think if I think about something that I would say is a hallmark of Iain MacLeod, it's the comeback. And Debbie Webster, is kind of stands high among those. I mean, what an unexpected yet brilliant move it was to get Sue Devaney back on the show.
Not seen since 1984, as I remember.
Yeah. That was the longest ever gap between appearances for a female character on Coronation Street, breaking Jenny Bradley's or Connor now record. I'm still just a little bit niggled by the fact that despite the fact that Debbie's been in it for 5 years now, it hasn't felt like she's made a huge impact, and it always feels a treat when she comes on screen, and that's kind of a way of saying we don't use you enough. You shouldn't feel like, oh, it's a Debbie gets a line, oh, Debbie's doing the mediation for George and Glenda.
I totally agree with you, but I'm always wary of giving somebody who's so colourful more of a centre stage, because I think it would work brilliantly, but there have been really high profile examples of when it bombed. Like Gemma is probably the biggest one, because everyone loved her and thought she was great, and she was colourful and larger than life, but she didn't work, I don't think, the way that they wrote her as a major character. And Debbie, I don't think the same thing would happen with Debbie, but I'd much rather be wanting more than be fed up with it, because I don't ever want to hate Debbie.
Yeah.
But you're right. Every time I see her in a scene, I'm like, oh, good.
Well, they just don't know what to do with her and Ronnie either, do they? I mean, we can talk maybe about couples later, but one thing that I would say is another hallmark of Iain MacLeod is, unless a couple is needed for a storyline in which they are having marital issues of some sort, you kind of forget that they're together. Adam and Sarah were married for 2 years before they actually did anything together, it seems like. And
it's difficult to know, is that a real conscious editorial decision that has been made, or is it just a casualty of other things, like having too big of a cast, having too many issues focused storylines, blah blah blah. Some of these things are just inevitable side effects of another thing that's more important. Like, it's more important to Iain MacLeod to have big issues based storylines than it is to have character development.
I think so.
And I think that...
And community.
I think that that's a mistake, in my opinion, for what it's worth. I think that the focus should be on characters before anything else, because those are the reasons you bring back. Nobody remembers what happened in the first 10 years of Coronation Street, really, but we all remember the characters. You don't remember the plots, you remember the characters. That's what I think. Sometimes you will remember things like the tram crash, but most of the time, when you say, oh, do you remember Mad Maya? People say, yeah. If you say, do you remember when Dev's corner shops got set on fire? People are like, oh yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? No, but you remember Mad Maya more than you remember the fact that Dev's... If you said Mad Maya, people go, cool. And then you said, she set all his shops on fire. Oh, yeah. Do you see?
Yeah. That's not going to be the same for everybody. But right. Yeah, no, I do see what you mean with that. Any other particular comebacks as we kind of seem to have turned into there that stand out for you?
We said hashtag bring back Henry, and that happened.
Oh yeah.
We had Martha come back, didn't we? That was nice.
That was very unexpected. Well, we found out about that when we were visiting the set, didn't we? We had that little bit of information previewed to us, and my jaw was on the floor when we heard that they were getting Stephanie Beecham back to play Martha.
Biggest returns are Spider and Uncle Stephen, and what the latter, what an amazing return that was.
Considering that because it was announced very close to each other, wasn't it? Wendy Crozier or
Yeah, that's
Papadopoulos,
right, yeah.
Spider, Nugent, and then Stephen Reed.
Yeah.
And I was so head over heels excited with the fact that Spider was coming back. I was really intrigued about what they were going to do with Wendy. Stephen, I was like, do we need him back?
Audrey's boring Canadian businessman son? Or
But
no, I don't
obviously
think so.
his story took on a life of its own, and he became, the biggest comeback, or the most talked about comeback character that Corrie's had for a very long time.
Just amazing.
Has it ruined the character? For some people, yes, but we've never been shy about saying that we really enjoy the grisly, murdery, serial killery stories, and I think that injected a whole new lease of life into Stephen Reed that I never would have thought we'd ever see on Coronation Street. And 2023 wasn't exactly a vintage year for Coronation Street, but it did have that story, which I am eternally grateful for Coronation Street for. It just had some brilliant moments. But yeah, Spider's come back. Yeah, I was so pleased to have him back, and although they made some real missteps with what they were doing with the character, I think a lot of us will agree that turning him into a police detective, although it probably had a really good plot reason for it, Iain MacLeod, it just didn't really suit his character. And I did quite enjoy the extremism storyline that he was brought in for, but then he kind of went off for months, and then he came back just for his final scenes, and then he was gone for a year. The Toya relationship, I would have loved to have seen develop more, particularly in the wake of Imran's sad death. But yeah, looking back, I still think really, really fondly of the fact that we had Spider again after all of those years. I'm trying to think of some other. Lots of people were really happy that Natasha came back. Natasha Blakeman. She didn't really particularly stand out to us too that much. So I'm not fussed by the fact that she got killed off. Who about Sharon Gaskell came back. She was great. That was only, how long was she back in the show for? 1-2 months or so. But she, in that short time, the Abbott meme was generated that still gets referred to. We had Wayne. Do you remember when they brought Wayne back? Little ginger Wayne from for the factory collapse story. We loved him, and that was a real good example of a character who. We enjoyed him at the time back in the early 2000s when he was in it, when he was being adopted by Roy and Hayley. Nobody would have expected to see him again. He was given a new actor. He was really well received, but then he went away. But yeah, I would say that returns were definitely somewhat of a strong point for Iain MacLeod, even though we didn't get any quite so big returners, having somebody like, oh look, Raquel's back, or Karen's back, or Becky's back, or even Shelley's back, that I think would have probably had an even bigger impact. You're not going to get any of them back.
We also had Frida, we had Claudia, we had Violet.
Yeah, bringing back Claudia every now and then was a good move. I think we've probably seen the last of Ruler schmoozing it up on Coronation Street now. But,
sad.
Yeah, so that's kind of, I think he did a pretty good job in referencing Corrie's past and bringing back some of those enjoyable characters from there. What else is in McLeody? I mean, how do you think that the sets have improved or not under him?
Well, we've got the development of the precinct, which is
most recently
interesting.
Go on.
Well, no, it's just interesting because they had to build it so you couldn't actually walk from anywhere.
Yeah, it had to be away from Coronation
Street.
So
we don't really know where it is. How long did it take to walk there? I don't know. How much would you really go there? Don't know. It's good. It's a substantial addition. I'm really wondering how many more additions they can make space-wise in Coronation Street. It doesn't feel like there's a way, unless they purchase some new land or rent new land.
I quite like the precinct. Some people have said it feels a bit fake, which I don't particularly get myself. In my head, I've kind of spoilt it by going to visit it, and I know where it is, and I know that this side and that side is where it stops.
Yeah.
It's in the middle of it's got a car park to the other side of it. And also, the one thing about the precinct that has definitely bugged me since its debut when was it, 2 years ago, 1 year ago, just 1 year ago, isn't it, is that it's already starting to feel a little bit overused, and it used to be that people only talked about to go into the precinct, but they never went there, and now it feels like they're there all the time, and it has also been used as an excuse not to get out into Manchester to film quite as much as they used to.
To me, though, it's interesting because it's a bit more relatable to me than the rest of the show is, because the precinct, there was always shops near me that looked exactly like that. No matter where I've lived, there's always been shops that look like that. Whereas I've not lived in a terraced place.
No.
And I've never lived near a pub that close. Never lived near shops that close. So never lived opposite a factory. So from that perspective, Coronation Street's always felt a bit like a theme park that's, based on what an idea of a life that isn't realistic to me. If that makes sense. I mean, I know that it's based on a real place, etc. But it wasn't based on a real place that I've ever...
I don't mind it, but it is a shame that it has meant that they've not needed to go out so much. But, I'm not saying that this is an Iain MacLeod decision. We are not going to go out so much. If it is a budgetary constraint that's been imposed on ITV, we don't know, but we can only say what the rumours are saying. I suppose it is nice that there's somewhere else for them to get away to. I still think that there's an awful lot that they could do with some of the businesses there. They'll occasionally be seen carrying a Sweet Enough milkshake. Or talk about going to Rutland's. The charity shop, I mean, we know that Evelyn works there still, doesn't she? I'd like to have at least one of those businesses be expanded onto and into with a proper indoor set.
I mean, weirdly, we saw more of the inside of the charity shop before the precinct set existed, and since it's been built, we haven't been in
seen it at all. No.
And I mean, one thing that is a new addition that is kind of like not Coronation Street, but also is the whole Coronation Street experience. The tours. And the building that's a new addition, that didn't exist before Iain MacLeod.
It didn't, but I don't know how much of that is.
No, so it's probably nothing to do with him, but it certainly makes Coronation Street a slightly different proposition than it was before.
Yeah.
Like when we went on the tour, when we originally went to the set, you couldn't go. We went twice before you could go. And now anyone can go, and it makes it more accessible. And more fan-centric, like it was back in the old Granada days when you could go to the set then. And I think that's a really important part of keeping Coronation Street alive, and an important cultural touchstone for people.
Just trying to think of any other sets. I don't know how much can we credit Iain MacLeod with this, but new places, Trim Up North, although that's come and gone, hasn't it? R.I.P. Vin Diesel. That seemed like a really big important addition at the time, but I guess it was it always felt like a bit of a strange move to have two hair places in such close proximity. But to be honest, I'd have said get rid of the salon and keep Trim Up North. And maybe that's sacrilege, but I think that Corrie does need to change, and some of these long-standing businesses like the Cabin, like the Factory, like even Preston's now could afford to be recycled a little bit more.
And the good thing about Trim Up North is that it did look like a Northern Quarter kind of place, and very Mancunian, and also it made a bit more sense to have men going in to get the haircut more regularly, and it's easier to hold a pair of scissors up to the back of Ken Barlow's head and go, done your hair now, than it is to get, Toya with her hair in curlers. You go in and you come out looking the same. I mean, it makes more sense if a man goes in and comes out looking the same, because that's what you do. Sorry to tell you.
So where else? Chariot Square. I don't think Chariot Square is... I think that came in before Iain MacLeod, but it's certainly been I would say, overused extra bit.
Set it on fire.
I think there really is time to... I'd just like to see a bit more either out in the real world or keep it to Coronation Street, Rosamond Street, Victoria Street. I don't really feel the need to go... Because it makes it feel like there's only one hotel in Weatherfield now.
It's silly.
Unneeded. Something that was a big new addition to the show, moving away from sets and back onto characters, was the Bailey family, and this was, you know, within Iain's first 6 months as producer of Coronation Street, and it was big, you know. We've got Coronation Street's first black family. They've now been on the show for 5 years. They've completely refreshed number 3, which was always very much an old woman's flat with Emily there. House, yeah. How, you know, how would you say the Baileys have gone down in terms of legacy from Iain MacLeod?
I think that they had a very shaky outlook until the arrival of Dee Dee, and Dee Dee's saved the Bailey family single-handedly, in my opinion.
It's funny, isn't it, that they took a new character to kind of shake up the whole family.
Unfortunately, we've lost Aggie, who was a great character.
I think she was a lot of people's favourite Bailey. Unlike James, who
James
was also lost, but that's no big loss.
No, I don't care that he's gone. I don't want him to ever come back. He was boring. I like Michael. I think he's really severely underused. The fact that he's with Glenda now is great. The trouble with the Baileys is that because they were brought in right at the beginning of, right before COVID hit, they were segregated anyway because of the bubbles that were instituted, and so they didn't really have any outside stories. But it's like since COVID ended, it's like they didn't get the memo that you're allowed to talk to other people, and they just never really mixed with people on the street until Dee Dee came along.
Yeah.
And Dee Dee's really just in everyone's business. It's like they've gone the completely opposite way. And we all I think everyone loves Dee Dee. I think she's one of the most successful new characters in recent memory.
Yeah, that Iain MacLeod introduced, for sure.
And I think that with her now, there's a lot of a brighter future for the Baileys, because we were down to just Ed, Michael. And Ronnie. And Ronnie's like a ghost that turns up every now and then. Ed, with his gambling problem, became a rather unsympathetic character. And Michael, I don't know what they've done. I find him charismatic and likeable, but I feel sadly as though that is an unpopular opinion.
Same. I've got nothing against Michael, but
I want more Michael.
From the discourse online, he's not going down particularly well. But yeah,
I've like I said, all of the Baileys apart from James, I had affection for them, but I was just continuously frustrated. And you know, the symbolism of having a black family that doesn't talk to anybody was just a super embarrassing and bad message that was inadvertently sent by Coronation Street to completely by accident. It wasn't anything deliberate, but it's just like the black family. Oh, nobody talks to them. Like, oh my, are we really doing this?
It's not on purpose, but now you put it that way. They were kind of the issues family for a while, weren't they? You know, the gambling addiction, the homosexuality in football,
is the issues family.
the casual racism.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another criticism that I saw from lots of different people.
They did do James's story fairly well when he came out, I'm going to say.
Yeah.
What were you going to...
I was just going to say racism felt like it was a story that they kept coming back to, and, you know, people didn't appreciate it, or it was difficult also because there's more to being a black person than experiencing racism. But on the other hand, to have a black family and not address it would have been ridiculous.
It just felt like it was, you know, a bit too easy and obvious, and they went to that well a little too quickly, rather than integrating them into the street, rather than finding out what they're like as characters, other than just the black family. I know, and
I feel really bad about it.
I think it doesn't feel right to me that they've been in the show 5 years, and that's twice as long as some legends have been in the show. It still doesn't really feel like we know them, particularly Ed.
They feel like outsiders.
Michael to some extent,
because they came in like it's nothing to do with being a black family. It's because they came in as like the Richie Riches who had been downgraded to live in a terraced house. And they still have that feeling of remoteness, like we're better than you because we're rich and we've come from a house and we had a detached house, and we had a massive kitchen and all the rest of it. And we even had the story before Aggie left where we got a glimpse of what their life used to be. You know, spending £100 on flip flops is no big deal. And so because they've got that heritage of like being posh, I think that they're a bit more removed. And I do think that's a really important thing that I think sometimes online discourse, because it's so American centric, can sometimes lose sight of the fact that, I can say this probably because I don't have the experience of racism, but I feel like discrimination is far more based on class in this country than it is on anything else.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And it feels as though if anyone's middle class, the Baileys are.
Yeah, I just don't.
Even though Ed's like always turning up like, oh, I'm a builder. It's like, yeah, but you own a business. There's a difference between being a builder who is a tradesman, who works in a manual labour, and owning your own building company that is so successful that you are rich.
I just feel that if the Baileys were suddenly to be spirited out of existence, if the Rapture came and swept up the Baileys, A, how much would we notice, and B, how much of a legacy would they have? And no. I think things wouldn't be looking good on either count.
No,
whereas there are so many characters. The thing with Coronation Street is there are too many characters at the moment. Yes, it's all been very well and good that Iain MacLeod hasn't swung the axe, and I think it sounds like he's relatively well liked by the cast, but it does mean that we don't get to know the characters nowadays as much as we used to. But most of the characters, if they were, if you were to take a family and just say, right, you're not in the show anymore, people would miss them to some extent, and you'd still go, do you remember the so-and-so family? And I still don't think we're quite there with the Baileys. And 5 years is technically enough time. A year is enough time to really establish yourself if you're a particularly strong family. I'm thinking about the Baldwins when they came in with Danny and Frankie, and they hit the ground running, I think, and they said, well, this is who we are. And they got people's backs up, like the Battersbys did. But if the Baileys went, I think that they would be a bit of a blip, like the Mortons were in number 6.
I was thinking of the Mortons.
And I think that probably, after 5 years, the Nazirs, who are definitely easy to compare to the Baileys, were more successful. Because when the Nazirs came in, they were like, oh, it's the first Muslim family. But that wasn't all that they were. They weren't just a family for issues, and they integrated themselves into the street. You had Cal going out with Leanne. You had Yasmin opening up a community centre. Zidane.
Yeah, that's like the biggest problem with the Baileys, is that they came in as a married couple. So there was no romances to be had with other people on the street. And when James and Michael had relationships, they were with new characters that came in specifically for them to be going out with. Like what you need to do is what you've just said. Go and spread your little tendrils and go into relationships with people.
Your roots, get your
like
links
Michael going out with Glenda is brilliant, good. That's what they should have been doing from the beginning.
But Corrie hasn't been very good of late at just making friendships, have they?
They're not good friends, Michael. I hate to say.
I know. But if you're saying go and make friends, Corrie's not a show about friends anymore, apart from on the odd occasion when it's like, do you remember Sally and Gail used to be really best friends? Let's give them a scene once a year.
There's no time for it.
There's no time for just friends or meeting up at the Rovers at the end of the day. Like, again, in the older episodes, you think, you know who would be in the Rovers together and who would have a great laugh together, but there's no time for people to just be friends and have friendly chats anymore. It's really quite sad.
And when there was a smaller cast and it was more character centric, you could say to somebody who watched the show, what does Pat, not Pat,
who are you talking about?
What does Hilda think of?
Yeah, Annie Walker.
Annie, yeah, you would know. What does Sarah think of Michael? Yeah. Well, she thinks he's a good designer, I guess. What does you know what I mean? You could take any two characters and you would know what they thought of each other. Now, I don't think that some people even have been in the same scene as each other.
Yeah.
Don't know.
Let's talk characters then. There's been, and we did do a Patreon episode on this recently, there's been a decent number of fairly big new additions. There's also been an awful lot of very brief characters. I think that we're seeing recently in McLeod is introducing characters to come and have one story, maybe get killed off because he hasn't, he doesn't want to kill off any main characters, and then go. But there have been a few bigger names that have come in under him. I think if I look at the list of the big names that have been introduced under Iain MacLeod, or at least developed mostly under Iain MacLeod, Evelyn's definitely up there. We can't credit him exactly for her introduction because that happened before he arrived, but I think that you can pretty much count Evelyn as a MacLeod character. Same with Paul, I suppose. Who for you? Because who's been like the big ones? I
think a lot of the people that Iain MacLeod seems to have brought in that have been successful are people that had a relative amount of fame or were established already. And I don't know how unusual that is particularly, but you talk about someone like George, who
Tony
Maudsley was in Benidorm and everyone loved him and they were hyping him up before he came in. You got Glenda, who's Jodie Pranker, who was in like lots of reality TV shows, and she's in the West End and she was like super big and popular.
You even got like Sam, who was Jude was in Brassic beforehand and was known for that.
And even like Charlotte Jordan, who plays Daisy, had a following from her horsey Netflix things.
Oh yeah,
which is quite fun.
Daisy has definitely for me been one of the most notable additions to Coronation Street under Iain MacLeod.
Yes, definitely. Most famously, also Cassie, who
of course, Claire Sweeney,
from
everything.
Yeah, she's been in
things. Daisy has been one of his most successful additions, although also at the same time very frustratingly inconsistent as a character, and some might say that makes her, layered. But I just don't enjoy not knowing whether I'm supposed to be liking Daisy from one week to the next, which is what we sometimes get with her. The stalking storyline was superb, and it really made me like her and appreciate her and sympathise with her a lot more than I ever had done beforehand. And then you got to the acid attack storyline, and she started having that affair with Ryan and being a bit secretive, and then doing the catfishing. And I still like Daisy, but that was harder to be a Daisy fan. But when she first came into it and she just seemed to do nothing but rag on Johnny and trying to split him and Jenny up, I hated her. But there's no denying that Charlotte Jordan is a fantastic actress, and if she disappeared from the show, and she's only been in it in 3-4 years now, I think she'd leave a mark, unlike what we said about the Baileys. And any other particularly big names for you, or big characters that you particularly like to thank Iain for?
Well, I think the fact that we got Millie Gibson as Kelly was really great. A bit of a coup for Corrie. Would she have got the part in Doctor Who without having the part in Corrie? I don't know. I mean, she's so talented. Everyone can see how talented she is. I think she could. If she'd been given an audition for almost anything, she would have smashed it. So from that perspective, I don't think that she needed Corrie.
It's a shame that she left so soon. I do think that this story that we're getting with Lauren at the moment, it almost feels like it was written for Kelly. And then she went, and then we need another blonde that we can get rid of.
Ruffian.
Yeah, I think Kelly was a bit of a slow start, wasn't she? Because she first appeared when Gary was having a route around in Rick Neelan, her dad's office, and she came back from school. She was at Oak Hill, wasn't she?
Yeah.
And it took a long time before they kind of established her and say, well, we're going to do something big with her with the. With this Nina and Seb story, which no doubt we'll talk about later. Dee Dee, you've already talked about, has been a really relatively successful addition. Sam for me I think he's probably been, if I don't count Evelyn because of coming in before then, I think Sam has absolutely been my favourite addition to the show. Jude Riordan is utterly brilliant. He's so charming. He's adorable. I find him a really interesting and fresh new take on the Corrie teen character.
Yeah, on the kind of adorable child front.
But we've also had some that have been a bit more duddish, like Ronnie, in a way. Cassie, I'm still going back and forth with. Elaine, she kept going then coming back again, didn't she?
There are definitely characters that have failed to kind of land, and I don't think that you can blame the actors particularly, the stories just haven't worked. Like Stu is another big one for me. I don't know what to make of it. Like when he was embroiled in the My Secret Past as being the fall guy for a pair of lunatics. I was like, this is great, this is really promising. And when he came in, he was really, like, endearing.
Was really charming with his guitar, do you remember?
And his cough.
Yeah.
And now he's just, like, the kind of, like, boring, naggy boyfriend he kind of Yasmin.
Brings, yeah, and that kind of leads me on to thinking about characters that have got worse under Iain MacLeod, and we've seen a real roller coaster for Yasmin, haven't we? We always loved Yasmin, and Shelley King was a lovely lady,
bright, vivacious, really in your face, charismatic,
and she was superb in that coercive control story, and everybody was like, Yasmin's one of my favourites, but hers really is a case study in what can happen to a character when they're not riding high on the back of a good story, because sadly I don't think she's really recovered from that, and we still haven't quite gone back to the Yasmin of old. It makes sense that she's been damaged by her experience from Jeff, but
unfortunately it doesn't work in soaps.
No, and putting her with Stu, who, like you said, is just, there's just something about him that doesn't click for me.
Just like a bit whiny at the moment. And Yasmin was so bright and wonderful.
Well, any other characters to you that feel that under MacLeod have gone down?
David, to me, I remember we used to praise Jack P. Shepherd like there's no tomorrow. He's, I said David was one of the most compelling fictional characters in any medium ever. David who now?
It's bizarre how Iain MacLeod has let David drop.
I don't know if it's because Jack doesn't want to do as much on Corrie anymore. He's got his podcast now. He's got a family. I think he probably
got a lot of money.
If you if you're working your arse off because you've got to earn a living and you're passionate about it. I don't know, is he passionate about Corrie?
I think he is. Well, he was. He certainly knows a lot about it. He's not the captain on the big soap quiz every year for a reason. But he's also said, and it's been a while ago since he said this, and at the time I thought, well, there's nothing to worry about there. He said that he only wants to stay in the show as long as they've got good stories for him. They keep things fresh. I know, but haven't.
Okay, I just want to say, I felt the same way about that when when he said this. It's like, oh gosh, they better make sure they've got good stories. And then the years went on, and it's like, well, they haven't really had any good Platt stories, let alone a good David story for a while. And then you get to the stage of going, oh gosh, I hope that Jack P. Shepherd doesn't leave. I hope he doesn't go. And now I'm thinking, I don't really care if David's not in it anymore because he's not in it now.
And that's the sign that he has been mismanaged, because a character as strong as David, from an actor as brilliant as Jack P. Shepherd.
I stand by all the praise I've ever given David and Jack P. Shepherd as character and actor. I stand by that praise. I still really, really believe in both of them. But what on earth?
Yeah.
Who is David Platt?
I've also found that Daniel's gone a little bit downhill. I think they've made him a little bit cooler. I think I preferred him when he was at his ganglia, nerdy kind of incarnation.
I think he's a budding serial killer myself. Well, Nina to me is the saddest decline, because Nina was
just like Yasmin.
Nina was, again, quirky, bright, unusual, interesting. She had a different perspective on life.
And she was very confident, or at least that's what she projected.
And that now, they've done the same thing they did to Yasmin, and it's the same they do to all the women on Coronation Street. They make them strong and compelling and interesting, and then they give them a tragic story, and then they become broken and sad, and then Coronation Street says, oh no, but this is what happens in real life, and it's, you can't criticise it because it's mental health. It's like, no, it isn't. These are fictional characters.
With Carla was saying something similar, aren't we? We get more glimmers of the old Carla every now and then, but she's certainly not as undefeatably powerful and bolshy as she used to be.
It's certainly a choice to do it to every single female character that gets a big story, because they've done it to everybody now. They've done it, I can't think of anybody on any big female character that comes on the street who's cool and interesting and fun and great and sexy and whatever. Give her a crappy, put her through the ringer, and then she comes out flat as a pancake. Daisy, the same. They've even done it to Jenny. Everybody. I can't... Glenda's now going through it.
Jenny, to some extent,
Yeah,
I don't see it as happening as much to her.
No, since Johnny's died, they have given her sad, and now she's not even properly the real landlady. There's the secret plot. The Carla secretly owns it, or does she? I don't know. What do they even remember?
Story,
not sure. Nina, she had PTSD and didn't wanted to know where Asher is at all times. Watch out, Asher, because you're next.
But I still don't think that Jenny has transformed into kind of she's not like she's a snivelling wreck of a character. No. I mean, look at Leanne. She's been through an awful lot. She lost Ollie, and that was a super storyline. But she's still got that spark, hasn't she? The spark is maybe not the right word for Leanne, but she's still got the fire in her. I think that she's always.
She hasn't been quite as defeated as the rest of them, but I stand by what I said. I really do think that Coronation Street's got a serious problem, and it's funny to me that they only do it to the women, because the men have been through real bad times, and nobody says, oh no, but it's really important to do a good job about mental health to make sure that everyone knows how sad Adam Barlow is.
Well, let's flip.
I mean, Adam Barlow had his panic attacks and Digby, Dick and Caesar videos, and now he's back he's the same as he ever was. He bounced back fine. I don't know, Corrie, got a women problem.
Let's flip this and see, well, which characters do we think have got better under Iain MacLeod? And I would say Dev, for me, stands out. I can't remember exactly what we thought of him when Kate Oates was in charge, and at what point he kind of became this real hilarious comedy icon of a character for us. But I'm gonna say it was when when Asher and Ardy came of age and he became the embarrassing dad.
Yes,
I really, really loved him from that, and I think it has been in the past 5 years that he was always a bit sad and pathetic and a bit cheesy, but now he's embarrassing his kids. It's a lot more fun. So I think Dev has absolutely gone up in my estimation in the past 5 years or so.
Definitely for me, Bernie.
Bernie's a MacLeod character. She came in early 2019 when they wanted to expand Gemma's family.
Yeah, but Bernie was like, I don't know why. I'm not sure what I think about you, but I think it's since Paul had his diagnosis, maybe.
Yes.
I don't know. She's there's another side to her. She's a really nice but flawed, tragic character.
She was always a bit funny and woo-woo. She had her crystals. She walked around the house naked. She was a bit of a scammer. And there was just something that's a little bit unlikable about her. And when she went through the story with Kel and how he would abuse Paul when he was younger, and then Bernie would go and take pictures of Kel in the park to try and catfish him, and there was always something, and there's still shades of that to Bernie, with the laptop scam recently.
No, but I like her. I like that element of her, sorry.
But what we've seen in the last 6 months or so with Paul's story is Jane Hazelgrove absolutely blowing everybody out of the water with how wonderfully dramatic she can perform as well. And she's got such a heart in there, and she's felt like a real person. The pain and the regret that she feels from not being a proper mum to Paul or a better mum to Paul is palpable. I think that Bernie has shot up in my estimation under Iain MacLeod in the last couple of years. And maybe this is what he wanted for her all along. I don't know. And
obviously related to that Paul, who I couldn't have given two hoots about.
Yeah.
And as soon as he was hit by that van that Carla drove, and hurt himself, and then discovered he had MND, I really rate the character. I think Peter Ash is incredible. Who would have ever guessed? I really don't think that many people were that bothered about Paul.
I think people kind of liked him.
He was okay. He was just a guy.
He was just a guy, and he'd be used in the Three Gay Dads. And
but even that
was about it.
Yeah, I didn't go much on it, really. And I found since the diagnosis, the three of them together is a really powerful.
Yeah. Ryan's got better. Mostly because of the acid attack story. he's had his ups and downs. He's been a bit sneaky, but they certainly did rejuvenate him in 2023.
But can you see the stark difference here between how women react, how women are written to react to adversity?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But listen, just take these two case studies as an example, Paul and Ryan. Like life-changing, life-terminating problems that they've had to experience in their lives, and rather than turning into sad little shells and just being, I'm sorry to say, boring, they've become more interesting and more vital, and they've turned it, they've become more compelling, and it's about how they deal with the problems that they've been given. Whereas women seem to, the problem is the end of the story, and then at the end of it, whatever happens to resolve that, cut that, then that's the end of it, and now you're just sad forever.
Although I will say that Daisy barely ever mentions that she's got an acid scar on her chest. You wouldn't even notice, but she doesn't like to bang on about it like Ryan.
Well, I would, I challenge people, if you don't agree with me, if you think I'm wrong, then tell me why. And I would also challenge you, I think a lot of people are still kind of blinkered by a memory of a character and how they used to be. And I think Carla's the worst for that, because Carla used to be great. Carla used to be one of the best characters on the show.
Yeah.
And I know loads of people are going to hate me for saying that.
I think that she went downhill before Iain MacLeod.
Yeah, definitely. But that, she was just like the herald that's come to tell everybody this is what will happen to you. She's like the ghost of Christmas yet to come.
Yeah. Character-wise, I also kind of wanted to touch briefly on couples and the fact that they've not been as strong in recent years. I mean, we talked about David and Shona never getting anything really juicy to get their teeth sunk into. Ronnie and Debbie, Adam and Sarah. We've had Steve and Tracy split up recently, and it just kind of seemed to be played for laughs. I struggle to think of a really strong double act couple under Iain MacLeod, and I'd really like to have seen him do a little bit more to develop that. We were getting there with Jenny and Johnny, although a lot of that happened before he showed up as producer. Sally and Tim, although at the moment they're off the boil, we've not seen much of them. We did have that whole Timpotence story a couple of years ago, didn't we? And they're still, they've been together 10 plus years now. I think they're still Corrie's best example of a enjoyable long-term couple. But yeah, you only get your characters like, Beth and Kirk, who we don't even get to see what the house is like. Brian and Kathy, when they were together as a couple, we never went into their house. I would, if I was to say anything to Kate Brooks taking over as producer, it's work on couples and show them just everyday life, and not just when they're having breakups or or marital issues. You were talking about women who had terrible stories dumped onto them. I think another poster child for that is Summer. We've not seen as much of her in the past 12 months, but there was a time, especially going through 2022, where it was all Summer all the time, wasn't it?
And she was on the floor.
Yeah, fainting with her diabetes. Because another hallmark of Iain MacLeod has been the younger characters. And he spoke. He spoke just before the Nina and Seb story came in and said, we got a really strong teenage cast here. We want to make something of them." And I think, if you like the younger characters as well, you could say that he's done a fairly good job. And I think generally he has. I'm starting to get a little bit sick of it, and I think that they're being used to the detriment of the characters in their 30s and 40s. But hey, maybe that's just because I want to see people more my age range in it. But, Nina has been brilliant. Amy, still love her. Ardy, recast this year. He's taken on a new lease of life. This producer. He's taken a new lease of life since Adam Hussein took over.
Yes. Definitely agree with all that, and I think the actors are great, and I don't disagree with the focus necessarily on younger characters, because I think that is a way of bringing in new viewers.
Well, that's the idea, isn't it?
But it's also, again, like a really annoying example of don't have a jog, just run 100 miles an hour into a wall. Because if you said to me, right, okay, well, I'm trying to think of ideas for my soap I'm doing. I want to do some young character stories that might be relatable and help people to get into the show, and because I've got some really good actors here, and I'll be like, well, okay, well, what's young people? What do they, social media, maybe like struggling with that, or like image problems, or bullying, or exams, pressure about parents' expectations, and moving into a new period of your life. How do you decide what you want to do? That kind of thing. And instead we get pregnancy, grooming, rape, eating disorders, diabetes, car crashes.
I think
it can't just be I've got my GCSEs this year, can it? No.
But
it's got to be my mum got shot and I want to go to the prison to talk to You can make an interesting story about these things.
I would say probably my favourite teen story under Iain MacLeod, and it was only one that was, it was over and done with in a month or two, but it was Ash's Skin Lightning.
Yeah.
And that was Ash is another example of a character who's really blossomed under Iain MacLeod, although she kind of blossomed and then the petals closed up again. She was fantastic, absolutely superb in the Skin Lightening storyline. Then you had Corrie sharing the video of her getting undressed. And it felt like Asher is the next big thing on Coronation Street. Then they put her with Nina. We've already talked about the post hate crime story, Nina being a bit of a downer, and unfortunately that's not had the best effect on Asher either. Because Tanisha Gorey is fantastic, but now they're dwindling her.
But you say the Skin Lightning story, and that to me is a really great example of what I mean. Coronation Street and all soaps should tell stories that are universally understood, but in new and fresh ways that are based on the current world that we live in. So for the entirety of human existence, teenage girls have had problems with the way they look and feeling inadequate and worrying about their appearance.
What do boys think of them? What does Corey think of her in this case?
Coronation Street took this, I think, kind of not very well known for Westerners, especially white people.
I had no idea that this was a thing.
Skin Lightning and this pressure, and that was a new, fresh take on an old story. Coronation Street can do that because it's a whole untapped world of every generation experiences life in a different way, but the way that their emotions and their hang-ups are still the same as they were when Corrie started, 60 whatever years ago. Do you see what I mean? They don't need to reinvent the wheel every time.
Yeah.
But they try to up the ante and stuff. It can't just be, oh, well, I've said it enough.
I think that that team of characters, I think that they have got a good basis
really bright for future.
The 20s. Now they're in their 20s. I was like, Amy, I can't praise her more. Ardy, superb. I'm not as hot on the generation underneath. I know that that Dylan and Liam have got a lot of fans at the moment because of the bullying storyline, which has seemed to have gone down really, really well. Personally, they don't quite work as well for me as this lot, but I'm looking forward to seeing what Asher and co are going to be up to next, and I think that that's down to a lot of hard work and effort that Iain MacLeod has put into developing them as characters, but also the actors and actresses themselves have got a lot to...
Fostering talent and putting faith in them and giving them, risking, giving them risky stories because it could have all gone wrong.
Yeah, but the biggest risky teen story... Was it risky? I don't know. But the biggest teen story for me was the Seb and Nina hate crime. That was brilliant. When was that? 21 maybe? That was probably... If I think of what were Iain MacLeod's biggest stories and the most successful stories, I'd probably put Yasmin and Jeff Coercive Control at number 1, but hate crime pretty close behind it at number 2.
I'd have Stephen murdering people.
That's pretty good one as well, but I think for universal praise, that's not necessarily going to be up there.
But you see how those are character-based, and although they are issues, that's Corrie at its best, isn't it? They take an issue, but they make it relatable, and they use characters that are established, and it makes sense to be in the story.
Yeah. Well, Nina seems to have been brought in just for that story. And obviously it was based on a real life event.
Yeah.
And I think that Iain MacLeod maybe saw about that and say, hey, let's make a story out of that. It's just, it's a shame that post that, what's happened to Nina. But that was brilliant. You know, the week where that they were attacked was they went for about a fortnight where that was the only story.
Yeah.
Like, we just had a week of Roy in prison, and even that was kind of, it started to touch on other stories, but this was at least 2 weeks worth of that story. They gave it a room to breathe. They had Nina kind of break down afterwards, some superb scenes with Roy, who actually, I'm going to say Roy has been used very, very well under Iain MacLeod. I think that he's given a bit more time to the very oldies like him and Evelyn. So that's been a positive. And even the scene where Nina remembers what happened during the attack was very well done, and the camera pans, and this was a funny editing technique, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That was great. So I think that's been a really, really good story, and it made me hate Corey. Max Evans was a really, really compelling villain, and you know, he only needed to be in it for a little bit.
Yeah.
He was fantastic. More effective a villain than say Gary was in his turn as the I don't know what the idea with Gary was. Iain MacLeod made a big thing of wanting him to be the next Mike Baldwin and saying, oh yeah, he was a bit of a baddie in the background, but it didn't seem like the plan extended much further than we're gonna have him drop a factory roof on someone, murder Rick Neal, and then be a bit of a thug himself.
I was really happy about Gary's kind of villain for justice idea.
I feel that somebody like Adam takes on that role better than he does, because Gary really is just Mr. Nice Guy now, and Adam has never really been that.
No.
He's always felt a bit kind of smarmy and you
selfish.
Cut from the same cloth as Mike Baldwin, obviously.
Yeah.
Have any other, you love a villain, any other Iain MacLeod villains?
Well, Stephen's my favourite. I think Griff was great as well.
I think what I've not enjoyed villain-wise is the gangsters.
Yeah.
And just in the last couple of years, with the introduction of Harvey and Damon, that's really not my cup of tea. But Jeff was absolutely superb. But Ian Bartholomew's such a talented actor, and that was just everything combining together: story, characters, actors, to make a brilliant, brilliant story there. I enjoyed. Justin was good.
Yeah, there's been quite a lot of
creepy
kind of
stalker.
and bullies as well, like Mason.
I've enjoyed
Corey.
Mason. Jade was good. She was under Iain MacLeod, wasn't she?
Was she?
Yeah.
That feels like a long time ago.
That might have been fairly early on.
Yeah.
I think there's been some good villains, but you're right. Stephen has probably been the biggest name. No, actually, no. I'm going to say that Jeff is a bigger name in villainy, Corrie villainy than Stephen.
But again, those two stick out to me more than the rest because they were already characters before they became villains, and I think that Corrie needs to do that more. That's why I kind of like what's going on with Joel, because Joel didn't come in like, I'm an evil man. He came in like, I'm boring.
The only problem with all these villains is we've also had a little bit too much policey stuff.
Yeah.
We've even during Kate Oates' tenure, we were saying too many hospital scenes. Why is everyone always getting sick all the time? And that's certainly not slowed down under Iain MacLeod, I would say. But it does feel like we've had an even bigger increase in the number of police scenes. We've just had Vicky Myers being made full-time cast member as DS Lisa Swain. Craig has continued to be an utterly useless copper, but now they're finally kind of cottoning onto the fact that they're making that a bit of a joke in the show. But that's not really good for Coronation Street. It's
not really.
No.
What an interesting thing that Kate Brooks is inheriting here.
Just finally then, let's just see if there's. Oh, go on.
No, I'm just gonna say I think the biggest thing to me is the cast size and the fact that hardly anyone leaves.
Oh yeah, well, we're still on the subject of characters, yeah.
And I think that when people do leave, I think some people should have been killed that weren't, and some people were killed shouldn't have been.
Imran should not have been killed. What?
If I could change one thing,
I think literally one thing. That'd be it.
Because I don't know whether Charlie D'Amelio would want to come back to Corrie ever, or now, or yesterday, or tomorrow, or whatever.
I think he might like the option open.
But I do wish that Imran was still in the show, and I do think that Toya would be a more interesting character. I think it would be a better show if Imran was still in it, because he was a really fascinating character. I wish I could have seen him with Dee Dee. I think that would have been great. I think having 3 lawyers would have been much more preferable to having 2 policemen, because the lawyers are more have other things to do.
Yeah,
and it seems as though, I mean, we don't know what Swain's like as a non-police officer, because we've only had about 3 scenes where she's not being a police officer. But you know, Craig now, is he Craig, or is he whatever PC Tinker? Because he's barely in it as if he's not a cop.
Yeah.
Whereas the lawyers at least have a personal life.
Yeah. Iain MacLeod's been quite good with memorable exits. I mean, Sinead was good, although that was tragic. Rana, Factory, I think her last moments were good. Ollie, that was it.
Well, these are all deaths, aren't they?
Yeah. Johnny, I wish they hadn't killed Johnny. I don't know whether Richard Hawley would have wanted to come back, but I just hate the fact that that's not on the table.
All of Stephen's victims were great. I just wish that they were higher profile, and of course Cerberus and Charlotte Bronte were brilliant.
Even like Laura was good, and she was not a big character.
Laura was harrowing, and that was obviously because of Millie Gibson and I forgot.
Crawling all over her, Kel Allen.
Yeah, they were both brilliant in that scene. I thought, well, I mean, Kel decided to like that, but Millie Gibson,
Millie sold that. Yeah. There's been some good exits, but there's been a few, Simon Barlow's off at the back of the taxi as well. But that's always the same. I think in terms of rating his exits, I'd say he did pretty good job. But like you said, there maybe haven't been as many as there should be. And Iain MacLeod came in and said that I'm no axe man. I don't have a hit list, but I think he could have and should have swung that axe a little bit more. And I know it's very sad to say, sorry, I know you've been working on this show for a while, but your character is no longer needed. But he should have done. I've been having a look at the characters that have left under Iain MacLeod, and the only real ones that come across as being axings that I can really think of are Simon, and even that wasn't sold as an axing at first, was it? Robert, I believe, was axed, Tristan Gemmell, and Faye, I don't think that she wanted to leave. But
your definition of an axe is that somebody left the show.
Somebody was called for a meeting up to Iain MacLeod's office, and he said, sorry, I don't think we need you in the show anymore. But it just seems
genuinely weird, because those 3 characters, all it said were the problematic ones.
No.
Or we need to clean out, I
mean, obviously some characters were axed if they were villains and they had to go that way. But
that's not an axing.
Ian Bartholomew wasn't brought in to play Jeff, and he could be on the show forever. He had a shelf life. Stephen Reed, as soon as he was brought back, had a shelf life. But there's just been
Charlotte Bronte was never going to live past 5.
I think actually maybe Kathy was axed. I can't remember whether Melanie Hill wanted to go or not. But I just remember what it was like, and maybe it was nastier, I don't know, in the 90s and the 2000s. You heard a lot more of, so-and-so's been axed, so-and-so's been cut. I mean, Brian Park, 97 producer, was the king of that, wasn't he? And and it is horrible.
Yeah, it's horrible.
But sometimes it's horrible, and it's to the good of the show. And everybody says there's too many people on Coronation Street. So
how do you solve that problem?
If people aren't taking their voluntary redundancies, swing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Like I said, it's one of those things. Be careful what you wish for, because there are plenty of people that I can see being gotten rid of that I would love to keep forever.
Yeah. Yeah, there is Deadwood.
And it's going to be really interesting to see what Kate Brooks does, because, I mean, honestly, if you go in with no emotional attachment whatsoever to anybody on the show, it would be so easy and tempting to go mass culling at a big stunt that's going to happen in October.
So it'll save money. It'll get the ratings.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we're pretty much at the end with this now.
We can talk quickly about the stories.
Any stories
that
we haven't mentioned yet. As I said, Iain MacLeod's background was in storytelling. The story was always key for him.
Because This was from a press conference,
Go on.
and this is a quote. This is his words that he's been reported to say. My background is in storylining, so the way I run things is if the writers have a brilliant story, I don't mind who it's for. If it's good and engaging and keeps me interested, then I will tell it. I've never been somebody that pinpoints favourite characters and tries to mould around them. But in the same conference, he says, I'm not somebody that will necessarily prioritise an issue over character. Corrie's always been a character-led show, which is the reason it's still on the air after 60-odd years.
I found that very interesting that those two seemingly polarising statements were said... Polar opposites, in the same interview. One hand's saying it's storyline, the other says, no, it's character first.
I can kind of see how he thinks that those two things go together, but they don't really, do they? And the other problem is that, I mean, we know this because we do podcast and we say stupid things all the time. Sometimes you say something and it's not really quite exactly what you meant to say.
Yeah.
But he's had
like when I said polarising just then.
He's had plenty of time to come and actually, for the record, state what he really thinks. And based on other stuff, like the script to scene Twitter thread that I talked about before, when Iain MacLeod said, I don't think if you're going to do a story, do it 100%. Don't fanny about. This is paraphrasing. You've got to go all the way with it. You
can't just have them do this. Have them do this with a bit of side measure of this, and also an affair, and also somebody dead. Yeah.
Yeah. Don't just have someone go to the shops. Have them go to Harrods. You've got to go the max for everything. And I think it's I can't say that he hasn't done that, but I don't think it was a good idea.
This thing that he said, Corrie's character led, almost feels like, that's just what you got to say, so he said it.
Yeah.
If somebody said, how a character's important to you, he's not going to say, oh no, not really.
I don't care.
He's going to say, Corrie's always been about the characters and it's always been character led, but yeah.
Does he really believe that? I don't think. Based on his actions, and you can say what you like, but your actions really speak louder, don't they? So
what are some of the stronger Iain MacLeod stories? If we take some of the better ones first, and then
why don't we do the bad ones and then?
Oh, okay. We can.
I'd rather try and leave this on a high, even though I know that people, on the whole, are thumbs down. But let's be positive, because we haven't wasted the last 5 years. We've had a good time watching Corrie, haven't we?
Oh, yeah, sure.
There've been good things. But bad things have been, for example, the Audrey's Money stuff with the Platts, I thought that was a dud.
It had some good moments, but the idea that David and Nick would steal from Audrey, and the fact that caused tensions in a family that had been quite close,
really disruptive, and I don't really remember that much of it, which means it wasn't that memorable. Apart from it felt like a mistake, and I also feel like that was the beginning of the end of the Platts.
It was.
The Platts were, chronologically and storyline wise, what have they done since? Nothing.
Any others that stand out as duds to you that maybe we have or haven't mentioned so far?
Well, Yasmin's descent into kind of obscurity post Jeff.
They had that story where she was in number 6 with Elaine and Kathy, and they were all getting scared of a mouse together.
Yeah,
and
bad.
I'm going to shout out Ken going to Stillwaters, although it had its moments, and it was nice to see them filming away from it, having Claudia back, having a bit of Norris in there. But the fact that the 10,000th episode ended with the big shocker of Ken saying, I'm leaving the street now, everybody. And then for literally 2 months later, him say, hello, my dog's dead, I'm coming back.
The whole
it was a bit of a dud.
Stillwaters thing genuinely feels like a spin-off DVD that got made into proper episodes, because it was a self-contained kind of story with completely different characters in a different location to Coronation Street. The only thing that was the same was that it was about Ken Barlow. And that's what the spin-off DVD episodes or films are. It's like, take Coronation Street characters out of Coronation Street and put them somewhere else.
It also didn't really make sense to me that at the end of it, Norris became like the head honcho after
none of it makes sense.
Embarrassing evil Charles at the vote.
And who goes from I live in a terraced house, and I've never really had a proper stable professional job. Because Ken hasn't really. He's done all kinds of different things. I don't think he's got a good pension. How can you go from that? This is my point. How can you go from that to one of the most exclusive and expensive looking care homes I've ever seen on television.
Well, if you got Claudia bankrolling, yeah, which she maybe did, he's probably doing all right. Sticking on the Barlows, I thought that Amy's pregnancy was a bit of a dud. Luckily, it was over fairly quickly, although maybe that was part of the problem with it. Having Amy get knocked up by Tyler Jeffrey, who by the end of the year was being lauded as this turnaround hero. But yeah, just having her be pregnant, not really doing anything about it, and then the story was over pretty quickly. I don't know what went on there.
Bungled badly was Faye's early menopause story, because that was such a
another one that's
opportunity.
I don't know what the opportunity for storylines is, but that to me felt very much like hey, we're going to wave this issue at you in your face, a bit like Joseph's Lyme disease earlier this year,
God.
Which was
don't get bitten by a tick.
Yeah, which was totally public safety. Was it
PSA?
Yeah, honestly.
Well, the thing about Faye's early menopause is that I think completely by accident, Coronation Street entered this storyline right as popular culture was picking up on menopause. You had Davina talking about it openly. I don't know if that was the same time a show was on or what she was doing, but menopause was in the news and people were talking about it in a way that they hadn't done before. And Coronation Street stumbled into this completely by accident, caught onto a social movement that was already organically happening, and then what did they do with it? Nothing. They had in fact all they really did was betray anybody who was finding this an interesting and personal topic, because one of the major problems that Faye had about the early menopause was that she couldn't have a child. And so what did they do? They went, oh yeah, you already had one. And she went, oh yeah, that's right, I did. And then she goes off to a ready-made family with a child. Yeah. Watching that as a girl who's perhaps going through early menopause, or a woman who is facing it, what use or comfort is that? None whatsoever. It's pointless and insulting.
I'm going to call out what they did recently with the Rovers as being fairly badly handled.
Oh, terrible.
I enjoyed having Henry back last year. I thought that the drama of, oh no, the Rovers is closed, isn't it sad, worked well when the Rovers closed, but the fact that within months it was back up to fully sort of working order. Jenny and Daisy had stolen money from it, which was out of character, and Rovers is now doing absolutely fine for itself, even though it doesn't seem to be being managed any differently to how it was when it was hemorrhaging money.
Yeah, it was like, this is a completely impossible situation, there's no way to turn this around.
Yeah, but
the Rovers has to close. Oh, what if we just stole money from a dead guy?
Yeah.
Well, that solves everything.
Yeah, and then the other person, Carla, involved in it, finds out and seems to be kind of okay with it.
Yeah,
really, after a bit of a meltdown for one episode.
This kind of epic setup of like three titans of the street, like three of Corrie's biggest names. You got Carla, Jenny, and Daisy like battling it out for behind the scenes control of the biggest set on Coronation Street, that the oldest institution of the show and the best job in the show, which is to be the landlady. They set that up at the beginning of the year, and then they went, oh, don't worry about it, it's all just the same as it was before.
Boring business stuff, isn't it?
You always complain about business stuff, so we got rid of it. Well, why did you set it up in the first place?
So those are some of my. Do you want to call out any other, particularly the ones that stand out to you? Poor stories.
I mean, no. Let's talk about stuff that one of the things that we really like is to have shocks and surprises. And Iain MacLeod, although he hasn't had many of them, when he did, they were quite exciting. Don't you think?
One of the things that we really enjoyed about Kate Oates was that she did more often than Blackburn. Like to have little twists that weren't put out there in the press, and Iain MacLeod doesn't seem to enjoy that so much. But you're right, there have been a few good ones.
I mean, from the perspective of viewing figures, what you can say to argue his case here is that when you've got a halved viewing audience and you're down 4 million people, you can guarantee that you can get somebody to watch it by telling them something interesting is going to happen.
Yeah.
And I can't fault anybody for that, and I'd rather Coronation Street carried on by giving out spoilers than stopped, because they kept everything close to their chest. But when they do surprises, they are fantastic. Like one of I think both of our favourite ones was when we found out we knew that Grace was up to no good and we knew that something was happening, but we didn't quite know that she had actually kidnapped Tiana and that Grace and Michael were not Tiana's parents.
I think it's when you think you're being led one way and then it turns out that it's something else. It's the same with the acid attack. Yes. They promoted the acid attack happening, but saying, well, Daisy was going to have acid thrown at her, but then didn't say it was going to hit Ryan. So although we personally knew that it was going to hit Ryan before it happened, I think that was a really good attempt at building expectations for one thing, only to pull the tablecloth out from underneath you.
Yeah.
I enjoyed another kind of shocking twist was Abby's her giving birth. I mean, when she went driven out into the countryside by Dean, I can't remember his name, and then gave birth on the side of the road. That came out of nowhere, and it led to some really superb Sally Carmen scenes. I mean, she continued to flourish underneath Iain MacLeod, although a little bit on the downside the last 2 years, but she had a big 3 before then.
I think a lot of the stuff with Stephen that's why I like him, was surprising or unexpected to me. Whether or not it was told to everyone else, I don't know. But the LSD stuff, the weird musical accompaniment to Rufus being drowned. That kind of stuff. That's why I like him as a character, because he was really unpredictable.
It was just a shame that in his final week, they seemed to play it a little bit safe, and there wasn't one final victim for him. It's like, oh, what a surprise! Is Tim's going to be okay? Or, we didn't necessarily expect that it would be Peter running him down with a car, but it felt like he probably deserved a bit of a bigger exit than that. Speaking of exits, I think like Seb's death, I don't think people. That was another one. That was a bit like the acid attack, really, when it was Nina is going to be attacked. Right. It wasn't advertised as this is going to be Seb's exit, and I think when he died, that caught some people off guard. So I quite enjoyed that one.
So let's just talk about some really good storylines then.
Go on then. We've said an awful lot about Yasmin's story, but the magic box scene, the scene where she goes at him with the broken glass.
Eating Charlotte.
Yeah, eating Charlotte Bronte. Oh my gosh.
Tragic.
Yeah, the court scenes.
Yeah, Imran's monologue.
The dream. There was an awful lot to love
really
about that storyline, and that really caught the imagination of the viewers.
Paul's M&D storyline has just been amazing, I think.
Yeah, hit after hit with the odd side path that's not necessarily needed, but
just developing also. I mean, this is an example of what you were saying earlier about relationships and couples, and you cannot criticise Paul and Billy for not being a developed couple, because a lot of the drama and the heart of this story has revolved around them. And the moments that they have together.
The bath scene, the skinny dipping scene.
Yeah, those kind of the wedding, the first gay wedding in Coronation Street. I mean, if you talk about social milestones for Coronation Street, you can't fault Iain MacLeod, first black family, first gay wedding. The only thing you can say is, why did it take until then? But you've got to take the wins where you can.
Yeah, I'd like to call out, although there were certainly bits that I didn't enjoy about it, Toya, Imran and Abby whole baby storyline being quite exciting, because Imran and Toya we really loved as a couple and we related to them, but we always felt that they weren't being used quite so much. So in that time when they were fostering, I can't remember what the baby was called. But then there was obviously Elsie, little Elsie that came along as well. That was really sweet. But in the background, the affair, which I hated, but it still gave those characters a lot of screen time, and all three were absolutely fantastic actors. It didn't end the way I wanted it to. Having Toya purposefully kill Imran
and then
just in a moment of madness and get away with it was another one of Iain MacLeod's biggest, most ridiculous mistakes, and it kind of showed that sometimes he does like to put things out there for a shock and there'd be no consequence for it afterwards.
And honestly, this is one of the things that I'm annoyed too. I mean, we've gone back into
we've gone back to Maiden again.
But why set up Toya to have killed Imran on purpose, and only person who knows that as a fact is Leanne, and then retcon another story, which is Rose, so that you can have blackmail material for Rowan to use against her in the cult storyline, when there already was an established story where she murdered somebody and got away with it. What on earth are you doing?
Well, maybe that's still to come, I don't know.
Well, whatever.
But on the whole, I still did love that story. I think that some of the sad death stories were done really well. Sinead's cancer, that had the four-hander episode. Sinead's last moments were beautifully done. The videos that she recorded for Ollie, I enjoyed that.
Well, it's sad that that Daniel formatted the hard drive and they've all been lost because he certainly hasn't watched them recently.
Verity. I thought that was done very, very well.
Ollie's death.
But tragic. Yeah, and
I thought that was great.
That was superb.
Leanne was great in that.
Even Steve, not too bad.
Yeah.
You know, I've not talked about his decline because I think that started before McLeod, to be honest. But yes, Simon Gregson did a great job with that story.
And Seb's murder too, you know, another sad, tragic death. Also, the transplant story with Peter and, you know, the alcoholism and that finally coming to an end, in a sense, for that character as much as you can in a soap.
That was another great opportunity for Chris Gascoigne to show what a fantastic actor he is. Do you remember there was the scenes of him having spits on the floor. There was the scene
drinking
where he had
the whiskey shots. Yeah. Well, is the one that sticks with me.
Me too. That was great. They had the wedding for Carla. He face planted afterwards. And then there was the story with Mr. Thorne, which we really enjoyed. Just to give us a bit of a villain to boo at. Yeah,
and proper panto villain he was. Anything to do with Stephen being a serial killer, adored it. Also, maybe controversial, but Tyrone and Alina and how funny and silly that whole thing was.
There were some really good moments there, as much as I hate affairs.
And you know, Tyrone just slowly realising what a mistake he had made by getting rid of a woman that he'd, you know, been with for such a long time, he had so much in common with, and realising that he was with a child who wanted to put pictures of them with exploding cars.
That picture with the car behind them.
Brilliant.
That is an iconic image from the McLeod era. Tyrone and Alina by the car.
That's a prop.
It's a shame didn't it got broken or graffitied or something?
I don't know.
In the universe. It's also Evelyn. That gave Evelyn another opportunity to show her range, because she's not just there for the comedy. She has softened over the years,
and she's also really nice and fair-minded with that.
I enjoyed the story with Evelyn and the other Paul Copley guy, wasn't it? Arthur Medwin. That was a sad victim of COVID, unfortunately. I think they could have developed that a little bit better. But yeah, Tyrone and Alina was kind of fun. That had that brilliant 8-minute epic scene between Tyrone and Fizz when she realised that he loved Alina. That was superbly done. Jenny McAlpine and Alan Helsel both did brilliantly there. And of course, that has been left on a bit of a cliffhanger with Alina hopping off on the plane, patting her tummy. Maybe that will be revisited
maybe it was
sometime.
Indigestion, maybe it was pregnancy. Who's to say? We don't know. But I think those are like some of the biggest things. Abby walking away as she blows up Ray's car was brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of little mentions that we could do.
Frida in the community centre.
Everyone hates that apart from me and
We
Gemma.
thought that was brilliant. I thought that was great.
Yeah.
I'm really sad that didn't land as well as they were hoping.
Yeah.
I love Toya crying with the baby cradled in her arms in the hospital bed after Imran died.
Yeah.
Was incredible.
Very beautifully acted and fantastically written as well.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that Chariot Square scene with Audrey and Ken and Roy, and then they see Claudia's coming with Charles and they're hiding behind the but that came after a little dialogue between them about different types of flies for doing up your trousers. That was proper classic Corrie there. That was great. Lewis Archer bowed out under Iain MacLeod, didn't he?
Yeah.
Sadly, but I did enjoy his funeral with Claudia and Audrey fighting over the coffin as well.
There have been loads and loads of smaller scenes that were great.
I think if you look over Iain MacLeod and say that he's just ruined Coronation Street, I think that's unfair. There have been some real high highs under him, but I'm not gonna say that Corrie's not in a worse position now than it was when he came in. It clearly is, and some of that is squarely down to him. Some of it has been budgetary, probably. Some of it has been COVID, maybe getting a bit comfortable with the filming, the block filming happened under COVID, didn't it?
Yeah.
And they've not really gone away from it, and that's a huge detriment to the show to have characters disappear off the screen for 3 or 4 weeks or longer.
It's unfortunate because of the extra episode, the 6 episodes. I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back a bit in regards to workloads and what you can reasonably expect to. I think that until something changes like dramatically behind the scenes to do with the workload and how it is done. I just can't see how they can get around the block filming, which I think is the biggest
hurdle.
Invisible stumbling block for Coronation Street, because I don't think it's really apparent to a casual viewer that that's what's happening, because I think our memories are very short, and I'm the same. It's only because we do this podcast that I've even noticed myself that's what happens, but that's just how it is. And I think if you can solve that problem, you're on to solving a lot of the other issues.
It just makes like some of the organisational things. I don't know how much Iain MacLeod as producer was able to, how much could he control, or how much was dictated by the higher ups. And I wonder, now that he's been released from the real day-to-day hands-on aspect of Coronation Street, will that give him more of an opportunity to make these big sweeping changes?
Don't know.
I don't know. But this remains to be seen. He's now the executive producer across Coronation Street and Emmerdale. He does have a big soap pedigree, like we said at the beginning of the podcast. I think it felt like ideas were running low for him by the end, and maybe this is going to be give him the opportunity to freshen things up for himself and let Kate Brooks take on the mantle.
The thing is about Kate Brooks coming in is that I don't feel excited. I feel worried, because I think she's got a big job. And the fact that it took so long to find somebody that wanted to be the producer.
And then all they ended up doing was taking somebody from Emmerdale, which is what they've done the last 3 or 4 times.
Like, I'm really concerned, because Coronation Street producer should be a big get for somebody. But I think, to me, it feels like, because it's a prestigious job and it's a big show, and it's like guaranteed work. There aren't very many producer jobs where you just go in and do it for however long you want to do it and then you go. I think there's something about they must not be paying very much or something. There's got to be a reason why you don't want to take this job on.
One might also say that Kate Brooks' silence speaks volumes. We've known that she's going to be producer for 3 months. 3 months ago it was announced. And what have we had? Nothing. No. Other than the very first press release, which was just like, I'm really looking forward to working on Coronation Street.
No,
she has got to lay her cards on the table. She's got to do her manifesto. Now is the season for manifestos, if you believe the news. If you're following the news, you follow the news.
But listen, that's what I was trying to get at, actually, and I forgot as I was talking that was my point. What is she about? What's she want? What's she going to do? What's her plan? What does she think? What problems has she identified? She must have gone into this going, I know what I want to do here. Or maybe she hasn't, and that's why it took so long to convince anybody, because everyone's going, I don't know what to do about Coronation Street. But I don't want to be working under the guy that just did this, that, and the other thing.
Even if she has identified problems, how possible...
Did they get people lined up?
Chances she got to air those views?
Did they get people lined up and they said, I would love to be Coronation Street producer because I want to do X, Y and Z? And Iain MacLeod went, well, no, I'm an executive producer and you're not going to do any of those things because I'm in charge still. At the end of the day, the buck stops with me. Don't know. I think another point is that this is Coronation Street under Iain MacLeod didn't have an executive producer.
No, Kieran Roberts left earlier, didn't he?
And I think that is probably a big challenge, again, behind the scenes, that is invisible to people, even like us, who are kind of know a bit more about behind the scenes stuff. I don't really know how much that impacted Iain MacLeod as a producer.
He had a big job on his plate.
I can't imagine it made it easier to do that job, not having an executive producer around. Is the support of an executive producer, whether it's Iain MacLeod or anybody, going to make Kate Brooks' job easier? Bloody hope so.
I'm very interested to see what she's got planned for the show. If they don't say soon, it's only going to make people more worried. Corrie is... You
leave a vacuum if you don't if you don't set out your store and tell people what you're going to do. People fill it with their own ideas, and it's not going to be to anyone's
2024 really has seemed like open season for taking pot shots at Coronation Street. It's almost like as soon as it was announced that Iain had this producer, and I don't know whether it's just coincidence
Iain
or
had
not.
this producer.
Iain was announced as being executive producer, I mean.
Right.
I don't know whether it's a coincidence or not, but that was when a lot of the press articles started coming out saying people aren't happy with Corrie. Corrie didn't make the Christmas Day top 10. What's going on with Corrie at the moment? So
that's been a
the general discourse around fans, around the press, around anyone who says anything about Coronation Street is it's not in a good way at the moment, and I wouldn't like to be in Kate's shoes taking over this job.
No, I mean, it's a point in chalice.
She knows that her biggest hurdle is to turn around that view of Coronation Street.
Yep.
She's got it in a year's... If people are still being as critical about Coronation Street in a year's time as they are now, then she's not done her prime objective.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. The public perception of Coronation Street is not quite as important, but almost as important as what the viewers think. Because you can't get new viewers if the consensus in culture is that it's crap.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, really.
It really is. It really is.
So she has got to hit the ground running, and I don't envy her for that at all.
No,
and
I hope she's not listening to this.
I've got no suggestions, particularly. We've had some, I suppose, in there, but we can say whatever we want. But how many of them are actually practically possible?
Yeah, that's the problem.
That's the thing, isn't it? That's the rub. But I guess it remains to be seen. So that's kind of it, isn't it? That's Iain MacLeod in a nutshell. It only took us 2.5 hours worth of chatting about him, but I think we've covered his characters, his stories, the goods, the bads, the production, the wibbly wobbly camera effects and all. It wasn't all bad.
No.
But parts of it were.
Look,
and you can say that about any producer.
I think...
I'm so sitting on the fence.
Look, after everything we said and all the criticism, I still would like to say thank you. And I appreciate all the hard work because he's spent... I have no doubt there were sleepless nights, especially during the pandemic. And you don't become the producer of Coronation Street because you kind of have a passing interest in television and soaps. This is a passion project for anybody. And he's worked really hard, and Coronation Street is still a show that I watch and enjoy. And what more can be said?
And it's still number one.
Just because I don't agree with every single choice that someone has made doesn't take away from the fact that there's been 5.5 years of like great telly.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah.
So, I think it's time that we called it a day. That was a bit of a long podcast, wasn't it, everybody? Hope maybe you listened to it in chunks. So, we're going to go. Ta-ra for now. Goodbye.
Bye.